Secure your tinfoil hats, buckle down tight, and hold on loosely as we soar over the rocky tops of the La Platas on a rocky mountain high. Get sucked into the vortex of the Four Corners and settle down snugly at mile marker 420 in colorful Colorado. It is Sunday, March 22nd, Monday, March 23rd for those of you across the pond and beyond. Welcome to We Are Paradox Media's Late Night in the Rockies. I'm so glad you guys could join us this evening. I'm your host, Tessa TNT, and I hope you guys have had an awesome weekend so far. I hope you guys aren't getting cabin fever yet with the whole locking ourselves away and keeping this virus from spreading and getting mutated. But you've joined us on one of our media outlets, which is Spreaker.com. You can also find us on Periscope under Tessa TNT, where you can watch us live tonight. We're on Twitter, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iTunes, iHeartRadio, CastBox, Tumblr, YouTube, SoundCloud, TuneIn Radio, Deezer, as well as Podcast Addict. So tonight I have a treat for all my guys and gals out there. Tonight we will be talking to and getting to know author D.A. Roberts. And D.A. Roberts is an author of fiction primarily in the horror, dystopian, and science fiction genres. Born in Lebanon, Missouri, he now lives in Springfield, Missouri with his wife and sons. When not writing, D.A. serves his community in law enforcement. He has been in law enforcement for more than a decade, serving as a corrections officer, deputy, sheriff, hospital security team supervisor, and most recently, patrolman with the Walnut Grove Police Department. Best known for his Ragnarok Rising saga, he blends the zombie genre with elements of Norse mythology. The series has been called A Thinking Man's Apocalyptic World. This is a unique approach that creates a new subgenre in apocalyptic fiction, debuting in July of 2012. The series has been featured on radio shows on 3 continents. He is also known in science fiction for the Infinite Black series, and this series is based on the hit video game from Spellbook Studio. Approached by Spellbook Studio to create the history of their universe, DA's series explores the rich tapestry that is the Infinite Black. Download and play the game for free at www.spellbook.com. And in November of 2018, DA took on the challenge of the role of CEO of Jell Ellington Ashton Press. To find more about his work, you can go to jellingtonashton.com, amazon.com/author/DA Roberts, facebook.com/DA Roberts author. That's quite an impressive background there. And you've been writing for quite some time.
Yes, ma'am.
So when did you get into writing these certain types of books because of experiences that you've had in the past, or were you just inspired by other stories?
I grew up in rural Missouri, just outside a little town called Lebanon. A farm kid, so I grew up reading everything I could get my hands on, and it really kind of inspired me to want to be a writer on my own right. And I started fairly early writing short stories and poems and things like that, but it wasn't until 2012 that I had something major published as my first novel. I base a lot of the characters on actual experiences. A lot of them, especially the law enforcement tactics and things like that, are things I've actually done. So I try to bring that realism to my fiction. And I've always been fascinated by the paranormal. I grew up listening to ghost stories, sitting at my mother's knee when my mother was alive, and my aunts and my grandmother all used to tell ghost stories, and I absolutely loved those as a kid, even though they scared the tar out of me. And I grew up watching shows like The Night Stalker with Darren McGavin, and just absolutely developed a tremendous interest in horror and the paranormal. And as I grew, I expanded that into other areas. Like I would always look for interesting things when I'd be out camping or hunting, and I love everything to do with that kind of. Anything that has a creepy vibe to it, ghost stories, Bigfoot, cryptids, I love all of that.
So the ghost stories that your mom would tell, are these things that she actually experienced, or are these stories passed down through like family members?
A little of both. Some were passed down. Some were places that they knew that were haunted around the area where I grew up. The farm my mother grew up on, she said that the building's not even standing anymore. It was outside a little, well, it's now a ghost town in Laclede County called Orla, Missouri. There's nothing left there but an old grist mill, and it's in shambles. But the farmhouse she grew up in was haunted. She said it was not uncommon for doors to slam open and things to fly off the cabinets. So she grew up in that environment. And later in years, when her and her sisters were older, they would take their boyfriends or husbands or whoever they had with them at the time, and later my siblings and myself, and go to some of these places to see what we could see. There's a graveyard just outside of Lebanon called Lonesome Hill, where supposedly a witch was buried. And if you go there at a certain time of the night, you can see a red glow on her gravestone. Well, we kind of debunked that when we found that was a radio tower from a few miles away, but it was still creepy as heck.
Yeah.
I love going to places like that.
Well, it's so much fun, and it does fuel your imagination. And like some of these stories, I mean, as a kid with different experiences that I had, would keep me up all night just picturing and imagining different things.
Well, when I was a young kid, I'm 4 or 5 years old, I remembered one night my mother moved me out of my bed, picked me up and carried me into her room. There had been what we thought was a screech owl posted out, been staying outside my bedroom window, but it only came to mine. And then years later, when I got older, I read about Bigfoot accounts where it would go to the windows of small children and make animal noises. So I often wondered about that. If I had been older then, if I could have looked out the window and saw what was really out there. But I know it frightened my mother, and I remember that vividly. That scream, that I can still hear the call of that screech owl, and that's a terrifying call.
Yeah, even if they sit out there and just hoo. Sometimes I'll have one out here in the tree right behind my studio, and I'm like, wow. I don't know. Sometimes it creeps me out. Other times it's just pretty peaceful. Like you could really go to sleep to that rhythmic hooing that they do.
Mm. Well, barn owls, like most barn owls, are just the sound of an owl to me isn't frightening. It's kind of a reassuring sound of the woods. But a screech owl sounds like somebody's getting killed. I mean, it's screaming bloody murder, and it'll freak you out, especially if you've never heard it before.
It is like, what in tarnation is that?
Exactly.
So I grew up not too far from where you guys are. I grew up in Arkansas, basically, until a certain age, and then I moved around quite a bit, but so many different experiences that we had in Arkansas, and I don't know if it's the South, being that it's been populated for a longer time than the West, but it just seems so active, and it's amazing.
There's so much that goes on in the Ozarks. The Ozarks are really kind of almost like a nexus, I think. I mean, you can find any kind of experiences here, and the Ozarks has always really called to me. It's in my blood. It's where I was born. It's where I'll always be. But there are just some really, really weird things that have happened in the Ozarks over the last few centuries since the first settlers got to this area, and even before. I mean, my uncle who just passed away back in December, he was full-blood Cherokee. He married into the family, and he told me stories that he had been told by his grandfather that predated white settlers.
Could you share some of those with us? I really love people's stories.
There's one that I remember him telling me, and as I did the research for this book that I'm just releasing, that's called Apex Predator Wolf Moon. It was about a creature that was, for all intents and purposes, a werewolf or a dogman. It had the form of a bipedal wolf that would prowl around and snatch children that were unwary. And it's very close to the area where that was is very close to Lake of the Ozarks, outside a little place called Eldridge, Missouri, which is where a lot of the setting from this book is.
So there have been a lot of sightings in this area that kind of fuel your imagination for this book and give you like little tidbits for your story?
Absolutely.
And like you said, this is pre-settlers. This is like even back in Native American days. Is this still happening today? Are there still people experiencing this?
If you research some of the accounts, especially like the North American Dogman Project, there are a lot of sightings in this area. A lot of reports go unreported. A lot of sightings go unreported because people are afraid of being made fun of and ridiculed. But within just a few hours drive of here is the LBL, where LBL, Land Between the Lakes. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that incident, but supposedly back in the 80s, a dog man entered a camper and killed a family. And you can locate accounts of that all over the place. These, they're dangerous.
Yeah, and that was one of the questions I had for you. What is the difference between Dogman and Wolfman? Is there a difference?
Well, by European lore, the werewolf can change forms. It's a lycanthrope. It started out as human, became cursed through either by being bitten or a curse from a gypsy, and would transform under a full moon. That's the more or less the classic European model. But Native Americans have lore of skinwalkers who can change shapes. But also of these creatures, in Cherokee called it the Ulonga Doglala, and it was in that form. That's what it was. So much like the every tribe has its own word for Bigfoot. As I was researching this, many tribes have lore about the Dogman.
In our neck of the woods here in the Four Corners area in Colorado, we do have Apache, Hopi, Navajo, and Ute tribes, and I'm sure there's more that I'm forgetting. But they have the tale of the skinwalker, which, like you're saying with the werewolf, is a shapeshifter, but more along magic lines, as far as you have to take someone's life within your family or somebody that is dear to you in order to...
That's dark magic.
Yeah. And some people do it intentionally, and that's where it's dark, and some people unintentionally, like, kill their mother when they're born, so therefore they're able to use it, but in a different manner.
Yeah. It's funny you should mention you're out in the Four Corners area. Have you ever heard of a ghost town out there called Dove Creek?
Yes.
My great-grandfather was the sheriff of Dove Creek, Colorado, back in the late 1800s.
Really?
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, I grew up, once we moved out here to Colorado, I think I was in 4th grade, 5th grade, in Cortez, Colorado, which isn't too far from Dove Creek at all. And people still actually live there.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
I've always wanted to visit it. I've never actually been there. I lived for about 8 years down in New Mexico, and over near in Union County, over in Clayton, near the Texas, Colorado, Oklahoma border. I never got to go to Dove Creek. I would always wanted to, though.
Yeah, it's not very big, but I mean, I'm sure with you guys especially having a history there with your family, it would be quite intriguing, and so many different stories that you might hear from locals. Because a lot of people do stay there that grew up there, and some people actually still move there. I think my nephew just moved out there, but past the town, out in the boonies a bit.
I plan on going out that way here, hopefully in the near future if the coronavirus ever goes away, and so I can go out and see some of the history of the places where my family's been.
That'd be awesome. Yeah, if you do come out here, let me know. It'd be awesome to meet you and show you around. Not Dove Creek, but I mean Mesa Verde's not too far from there, and you just got to see that if you come out this way.
Oh, absolutely.
Speaking of the coronavirus, and we kind of got off topic with this last night. How is it in your neck of the woods? I think it's basically the same everywhere. Are the shelves barren and...
There's a number of reported cases here, and they haven't really instituted a full lockdown, but I figure it's probably coming. I went to Sam's Club day before yesterday, and no, it was yesterday, and the only thing they were really out of was toilet paper and on a lot of things like milk. But for the most part, just other than being able to get toilet paper, but we usually buy it by the case anyway from Sam's, so it's not like we're out. I wish we'd have bought another case before this happened, though.
Right? I know. It's hard not to get stressed out about it, but we've just been calling beforehand, when's your shipment coming in, and then Walmart's been doing it to where it's kind of like Black Friday. You line up for the toilet paper, and then they'll give you a package per family of toilet paper and a package of paper towels and whatever. That way people aren't taking the whole damn thing, because they will. It's pretty sad.
Thought about just ordering some off Amazon.
Yeah, I looked on Walmart.com, but I didn't think about Amazon. I might try that. Walmart.com.
Sam's Club will deliver.
Yeah, I put it in my basket, and as soon as I go to check out, it's like, no, we're out of stock, which it didn't even say that on the thing, so that's weird. I don't know. It's crazy. I try not to let it freak me out, because that negative energy will just affect my immune system, and I don't know. I think we'll get over it pretty quickly. We're pretty...
I think so, too.
Pretty rational for the most part.
Yeah, we haven't had any reports of anybody doing anything crazy around here. I mean, it's just for the most part business as usual. One of the bigger churches in town today was doing coronavirus care packages for people that needed assistance, and it was a pretty big event. I mean, they gave out a lot of stuff, and it was care package of basic hygiene items and a few rolls of toilet paper and things like that. But it was really nice of them to do that.
Yeah, that is super
Yeah.
awesome. There is a lot of people that can't get out there in time, and once they do, they move so much slower than other people, as far as the elderly, and you can't even reach certain shelves, and, a lot of times by the time they get there, there's nothing left, but it's been nice. I've seen a kid go out of his way to help an elderly person that couldn't look up to a certain height, and that was pretty nice to see in the whole chaos of
Some of the
everything.
stores around here are doing early hours, opening like an hour early just for elderly shoppers, which I think is pretty neat, and they're assisting them get what they need, which I think is fantastic. I'd like to see more places do that.
Yeah, it's a very honorable thing to do, and it makes it a lot fairer because there's a lot of people that are just out for themselves and not thinking about the smaller person or the older person or whatnot. But yeah, it's pretty cool that they're doing that and actually, taking care of people. And it's very cool that your church did that and they're doing these care packages and taking care of everybody. So growing up, you're basically there in Missouri. You're in the Bible Belt, correct?
Yeah,
Yeah. So,
yeah. We jokingly refer to it as the buckle of the Bible Belt.
the buckle. Oh no, you don't want to catch that. So did your family with these certain stories and relations to these certain stories catch any judgment and ridicule for repeating them, or kind of having fun with it?
Not really. I mean, like I said, I grew up on a farm. My family are all hillbillies, and when you deal mostly with hillbillies, they're a pretty superstitious folk. I mean, you tell them you saw something creepy in a graveyard, they'll avoid the graveyard and not say, "Oh, you're full of it." It's just everybody around here that lives out on these farms in these rural areas has had experience or one or another. Chickens going missing, just strange occurrences around the farms. I mean, it's not uncommon. They don't tell they don't talk to a lot of outsiders about it, but you got to be one of the clan, so to speak, one of the hillbillies themselves. If they don't know who your kinfolk are, they won't talk to you.
Yeah, it's interesting the different people that you do catch flack from. Like my Aunt Vicky, she's like, "What makes you think God's going to protect you doing this kind of stuff when you're communing with demons?" I'm like, Auntie, they're not all demons, they're ghosts and stuff. But, people have their certain beliefs, but it's just kind of funny where you don't expect it and where sometimes it does come from. So,
Hmm.
was the Nordic zombie book line, was that the first book series that you had written?
Yes, the Ragnarok series was the
Yeah.
first series I produced. It actually originally started out as a five-book series, but when I signed with J. Ellington Ashton before I actually began up taking over and running J. Ellington, when I first signed with them, they wanted their publication model is a little different. They don't do larger books, 400 or 500 pages, and all my Ragnarok books were pretty beefy. The five book series were all right around the 500 page mark. Well, the first thing they asked is split them. So now it's a 10 book series, and it's doing fairly well. But it's it's a bridge I've already crossed. As much as I will always love the Ragnarok books, I put my heart and soul into writing those. I've moved on from those books. I still am proud of them. I still want to see them do well. I'd love to see them pick up as a Netflix series or something like that. But I'm doing other projects, and I want to be known for those other projects.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. And even Amazon's doing their own little series now. So, I mean,
Hmm.
who knows who's going to pick you up?
I hope so.
That'd be awesome. Where'd you come up with the whole idea of the Ragnarok whole zombie thing?
Well, one night there was me and four other officers were sitting around having coffee, and we were all joking and making fun of different things, and just being guys, just being idiots talking over coffee. And we talked about what we would do if different things happened and how we'd react, and then we got to talking about horror movies, and then inevitably somebody, I think it was Sowards, brought up zombies, and somebody said, "Well, what will we do if the zombies hit Springfield?" And most of us just kind of laughed it off. We're like, yeah, zombies, whatever. But like, no, seriously, what will we do? So we sat down and looked at the actual emergency management book on how to react for riots and stuff like that, and started trying to figure out how we would make plans based on the emergency management plans for other situations. And I realized pretty quick we didn't have the manpower to stop something that widespread, but we would try. So the next morning, I was working overnights at the time. I was heading home, and it was 7:30 in the morning. I was driving home, and every building I looked at, I thought, well, could we defend that? And I'd see other cars, and I'd be like, oh, could we do something to that to keep the zombies out so we could still drive? And by the time I got home, I just couldn't quit thinking about it. I couldn't go to bed, so I sat down and started jotting out the notes that became now a 10-book series.
It's funny how that happens. I've actually written poetry that way. Like, you have a line that keeps going through your head, and it won't go away until you write it down or whatnot. It's pretty interesting.
I wanted to do something different than the traditional zombie story with the Ragnarok books. That's why I blended in elements of Norse mythology. I'm not your normal person, I suppose. I'm a Norse pagan. So I wanted elements of that in the books. And when I started doing the research into zombies and the undead, I started looking at the Norse pantheon, the Norse beliefs, and they have something along the lines of 30 different words for different types of undead. So wow. I wanted to fuel that. So I took elements of Norse mythology and started making the zombies pattern more on the Norse Draugr, which were walking dead. And I thought, well, okay, what else have we got? And when I started reading about Ragnarok, it said that during the time of Ragnarok, Loki would lead an army of the dead out of Hel, Hel, 1L, into the world of men, and to basically bring about the end of the world. And I thought, well, there's a zombie apocalypse right there. So I started looking at the history of the texts on Ragnarok, and it said Ragnarok was a cycle, and it changed. And I thought, well, what if the zombies came first? What if Loki brought the dead first before everything else, to kick off Ragnarok, and then just built from there.
So you said there's 30 different terms for...
I don't know if it's exactly 30, but there are so many different types of undead in the Norse mythology. There's the Draugr, which are the walking dead. There are Barrow Wights, which are undead that guard tombs. There's just so many different types. There's ghosts that go door to door, knocking on doors, looking for someone to give them shelter, and if they let them in, they'll kill everybody. I mean, the Norse have so much history of dealing with the unknown, dealing with the occult, dealing with the dark side of death.
That's very interesting, and people think mythology is not true, but there's a lot of things in mythology that I do find to be accurate, and that could be true. I mean, a lot of times fact is indeed stranger than fiction, and a lot of these things that we think of as fiction now are actually, or were at one time, what was actually going on. So that's pretty interesting. I've never heard that with the...
Well, most myth are built on some sort of fact. Something happened that the myth was built from. So even looking at more Judeo-Christian myth, you see a lot of things that are actual events that where these legends came from. Legends grow off tales that were told of something that actually happened. Excuse me, sorry, had a belch there. I'm sorry.
Oh, no worries.
But all of those really originally came from some sort of event, and it's those events that later become the tales of legend. And that we're living in a time now where, who knows, 150, 200 years down the road, things that people are doing now might be the legends of those days.
It's very interesting and intriguing, and even with tribes today, like just the different things from their past, their history, and things that they're trying to teach to the younger generation, which doesn't seem as into things that are important to the tribe as they used to be, but it's very intriguing to me. So what tribes do you guys have in your area?
Let's see. There's the Kickapoo, the Osage, Cherokee, Oglala. That's I'm trying to remember some of the others. There's a bunch of tribes in this area. I mentioned the Kickapoo. Cherokee's big around here. There's a lot of, in fact, just down by the Oklahoma border, about an hour from here, an hour and a half, are the Cherokee Nations. They've got casinos down there. The reservations are down there. But there's a lot of tribes in this area. Some of them don't even exist anymore. They've just vanished.
Yeah, and it's hard to say where they go.
Mm-hmm.
Dennis in the chat room was wondering, DA, when did you first experience the paranormal or paranormal activity?
Like I said, my mother would tell me ghost stories, and we've gone to some of these places looking basically to scare the crud out of ourselves. And sometimes we succeeded, and sometimes we didn't find anything. But I've seen some pretty weird things growing up, and I can't say for sure that they were paranormal, but they were certainly enough to weird me out. Just for example, my wife and I. You're familiar with geocaching?
Were like rocks and stuff, or?
Yeah, no. Geocaching is a it happens all over the world. People hide little boxes of treasure, and you use your GPS to find them.
Oh wow.
It's a lot of fun. Her and I do that just for fun. Well, one of the geocaches we were looking for, I want to say 6 or 7 years ago, led us to a cemetery, an old cemetery out near what is that? Mount Vernon, Missouri. And when we got there, the first thing we noticed odd was that a lot of the graves were not facing the same direction, which is weird because most graves, face east, um, face the rising sun. Well, these graves were in all kinds of weird directions, and we were, my boys were pretty little then, so they're kind of scampering around, looking at stuff, helping us look for the cache. And we had our dog with us. It was a bull mastiff, and he started acting really weird, which is unusual for him. He was pretty rock solid dog. Take care of the boys. We lost him to bone cancer about 4 years ago, but in that I digress. Well, he was acting really odd, so we found the cache and we started to head back to the vehicle. Well, over across the cemetery in the trees, a large, I mean, like when I say large, I mean, we're talking mastiff-sized dog walked out of the trees, and it was just jet black. There was not a spot of any other color on that dog, and when it emerged, I mean, it kind of freaked us out because we didn't hear anything, and that dog was, I mean, as black as pitch. It was just everything. You couldn't see any color on this dog whatsoever. Well, it watches us get back to the car, and as we're getting the kids in the car, and I'm getting the kids because in the car seats, and got the dog back in the car, and the dog was acting, real kind of spooked this whole time. And I turned around with the digital camera and I snapped a few pictures before I got in the driver's seat. When we got back to the house and uploaded those pictures to our computer, you could see the shape of that dog in the trees. And it just appeared massive. I mean, the size of these oaks. You could see it plain as day. I've got to find those pictures and I'll send them to you.
Yeah, that's insane. Was there a color to its eyes, or you
Didn't
didn't
see
detect
anything
any
but black.
color? Wow. Sounds like a dire wolf, kind of.
It was about that size. It wasn't shaped like a mastiff. It was shaped more like a like a wolf. I mean, it was not a Great Dane. I'm looking at a German Shepherd, wolf, something like that with the elongated snout. It was a big dog, and it was easily as big as my bull mastiff. And he was 145 pounds.
Wow. Right outside of the cemetery, you would never expect to see that.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I went back to Arkansas in October because we were going with Caden and Alyssa down to New Orleans to meet a couple friend of ours. But while we were in Arkansas, we found a cemetery on land that we always played at our aunt and uncle's house, which we had never seen before. And we saw this on the way up to the cemetery where my mom and dad's buried. And we get up there and we're walking around, we're visiting all the family members there and cleaning up our parents' grave and such. And we keep hearing this noise around the cemetery. And this is out in the middle of the hills. Unless you know where it's at, like, you're not going to find it. And then my sister's like, well, come on, let's go on the outside of this fence of the cemetery and let's go check it out. And I'm like, no, I don't feel comfortable with that because, like, this right here is hollowed ground and there's nothing to really protect us out there. And plus there's so much fallen dead stuff. Like, there could be cottonmouths or rattlesnakes or
Copperheads.
something. Yeah. And so we decide not to, and we're piddling around a bit. We're taking all kinds of pictures, and all of a sudden, she's like, "Did you hear that?" And I was like, "No, what was it?" Besides the movement, I haven't heard anything. She said it sounded like a scream. I was like, "No, I didn't hear that. That's so weird." And then right before we left, I heard it, and it was not like a normal scream. It sounded like a Native American, the way they'll do their war cry or whatnot, the way they'll do that scream. And I'm like, that's totally what it sounded like, was a Native American doing a war cry. And she's like, that's exactly what I heard earlier. So we thought it was cool, but we did decide to leave at that point. But it's
I don't
interesting.
blame you. I probably would have as well.
Yeah, different things that are out there, especially at cemeteries that you wouldn't expect, but maybe we had just spent a little too much time there, and I thought we should leave. I'm not sure, but it was very interesting.
Yeah, things like that. I've loved stories like that. I love places like that, and there's a few places. In fact, one of the nastier battles of the Civil War was just outside Springfield, the Battle of Wilson's Creek, and I know a number of people, including a friend of mine that used to volunteer out there, that have seen apparitions there, full-bodied apparitions, and I haven't yet been out there to do any checking, and I know it's literally 5 miles from here, but I need to go out there. I really want to. It's one of the places on my list.
Yeah, a few summers ago, and you think about the Civil War, you think about the different uniforms, and you always think of the blue and the gray. But in Arkansas, come to find out, after my daughter had seen an apparition on the Prairie Grove battlefield, she saw it in a khaki uniform, and I was like, well, maybe that's a game warden or a guy that used to do tours here, and he was very fond of the place, so he decided to stay here at the main house of the general. Well, we got chased out by the cops that night. It was totally open. I guess we weren't supposed to be there without permission, so we came back the next day to get written permission and such, and walking around the museum, we see this uniform, and it's khaki colored with gold embellishments, and it was actually an offshoot for the Civil War of people in that area of Pettigrew, Arkansas, and probably other places in the South. It was
A lot
intriguing.
of places during the Civil War didn't have access to the gray wool material, so they used a lot of butternut, which is a very khaki color. So
Mm-hmm.
it, that was actually not that uncommon. A lot of the regulars from states from the southern states like Louisiana, Arkansas, Mississippi used that khaki color.
Yeah, we had so many amazing experiences at this battleground, and one was communicating with the general's ex-wife because he found a much younger and preferable wife after her. But she's still hanging out there, and we actually got her on the FLIR camera with her poofed out dress, and she communicated with us quite a bit. One thing we had tried, and I can never remember the name of this experiment, but you use speakers to use sound of that era, so you could use music
Hmm.
from that era. I decided to use Civil War sounds, so it's cannon fire, people screaming instructions, people screaming gunfire, so on and so forth. And we were sitting in this little ravine where people would hide during this time. And my daughter, I believe she was like 10 at the time, really wanted to leave at that point. And I'm like, it's okay, don't be afraid. They're just ghosts. We're all going to be ghosts someday. And she's like, Mom, I'm not afraid of what I saw. I'm afraid of what I felt. But she saw this individual run past the car and jump into the tree line. And she said just the fear of losing life and the anxiety at that moment really did upset her. So we did take her home. But it was cool that it
I've always been a
worked.
fan.
But at the same
Sorry.
time, it was sad, because I felt bad for re-invoking that for that person.
I've always felt that you should trust your gut. If your gut tells you need to get out of there, you probably do.
Hmm. Yes, the gut never leads you astray.
I would
I
love to
totally
have been
agree
there
with
for
that.
that. That would have been fantastic.
It was very impressive. And we had left so fast, I actually left a piece of equipment, but we were going back anyways, so I picked it back up when we came
That's good.
back.
Glad you didn't lose it.
Yeah,
That stuff's expensive.
it is. You can go broke doing this. But it's amazing all the energy that's still out there from so long ago. People ask, why aren't there dinosaur ghosts? There's been
Who knows? There
sightings,
might
though.
be.
Yeah, there's been sightings. Are these ghosts or are these things coming back into the fold?
Yeah. I mean, energy's energy. I mean, we're all made up of it.
So I've heard stories like more out east, like on the coast of North Carolina or whatnot, the Thunderbird. Do you guys have anything
Hmm.
like that in Missouri?
There's a lot of Native American legends of it. A lot of tribes have Native have the a lot of tribes had different versions of the same story. Um, but I've never heard of any sightings in this area. There was a sighting sometime in the late 1800s up in Laclede County that the description the farmer gave sounded like a Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent. And it actually made the Lebanon Daily Record back in the late 1800s. I think I can find the article, but that was a sighting from sometime in the late 1800s, like 1890s.
It's amazing.
That's as closest sighting I've ever read. I read a lot of accounts.
And Jason is just coming in. I think he missed the part where we introduced where you are from in Missouri. But he's wondering, what part of Missouri are you from?
Kind of central Missouri. Lebanon's on the I-44 corridor, about an hour northeast of Springfield. I live in Springfield now, but I was born and raised in the Lebanon area between Lebanon and Eldridge, Missouri, out off North 5 and YY. On a little farm out there. It's all grown up now. It's housing development now, which kind of saddens me. But yeah, the old farm's gone.
It's amazing how quickly these areas do grow, and things that used to be there that are not. Pettigrew, still the same today as it was when I lived there. Nothing really's changed except for people that are gone. Yeah, it's amazing how many different stories from tribal people and farmers that are living out there as well. So tonight on our show, we're actually doing an unveiling of the cover of your book. And are we going to do that in the second hour? When did you want to do that?
I'll leave that up to you whenever you want to reveal it.
Okay. And then we also have a link to we're going to put the book out live. Is that what we're doing?
Mm-hmm.
So exciting. I'm super excited. So can you tell us some more stories that got you into this book of the Wolf Moon?
I like the legend of the Dog Man. I suppose just growing up loving creepy things like that. The big ones that scared me were werewolves and zombies. So I've always really kind of gravitated towards stories like that. But after hearing things about like the Beast of LBL, the Land Between the Lakes in Kentucky, and it actually killing people, cattle mutilations, dogs being ripped to shreds in an area where there's no mountain lions, just things like that. We've been reported around here for generations, and I always figured something like that has to be out there. There, in fact, down by Joplin just a few years ago, there was a guy had a limousine bull, and I don't know if you're familiar with limousine bulls. They get big, 2,000-pound range. I mean, it's a big, big, big animal, and had one that had been attacked and mauled pretty badly. It was still alive, but it was lacerated bad. And I can tell you, there's not a mountain lion in the world that's going to jump an animal that big. Mountain lions, they will. Basic prey assessment is what risk is there to the predator. They're not going to jump something that they run the risk of getting hurt themselves, because if the predator is hurt, at that point it's going to be prey for something else. It can't risk attacking something that can hurt it or kill it. So something that's 12 times its size, it's not going to go after it. It just doesn't make any sense. And the spread pattern on the claw marks on a bull whose haunches are chest high on me, that's just not right for a mountain lion. They're not that big. 80, 90-pound kid, yeah, it'll drag one off. I hear all the time, especially up in Yellowstone, of people getting attacked. In fact, just recently, one of the articles I read was a farmer who was attacked, and when the deputy showed up to try to chase the mountain lion, it attacked her. So mountain lions are pretty brave, but they won't go after something that much bigger than them. I mean, a human, that's about the end of it. 200-300-pound range, but over 1,000 pounds of beef, that's a good way for even a big cat to get stomped to death. So it had to be something bigger.
Yeah, for sure. And like you're saying, mountain lions, they tend to go for the smaller prey. Like here at Mesa Verde, we had a kid get grabbed by the head by a mountain lion, and luckily the parents chased it down screaming and such, and it dropped the kid. But they're looking for the easier prey, not something, like you said, that's going to hurt them or cause them to have to work too hard for it. That's insane. That is a large piece of meat to get attacked. So
Well, the
did they have
pictures
to...
I saw, the claw pattern were wider than my hands, and I've got a pretty big hand. I wear a size 14 ring. There's no mountain lion in the world that's got a paw bigger than my hand. I mean, they're a good sized animal, well over 100 pounds, but you don't see them with paws this big. I mean, they a good sized saucer maybe, but not wider than my hand, because their paws don't splay out like that. They grab and dig in to bring prey in, and it was just the cut patterns were just too big.
Did they have to put this animal down, or were they able to...
I think they were able to rehabilitate it. The article didn't say, and I have yet to be able to track it down. But I know that and the lacerations probably wouldn't have been fatal on an animal that big, because they weren't in any vital areas. They were all across the haunches.
Yeah.
So scars, yeah. But it was a breeding bull, and they've got a lot of money invested in those. So I doubt they put it down.
Yeah. They're going to get every last drop out of that sucker.
Literally.
So in this case, are they thinking like this is like a werewolf type of thing more than it would be like a skinwalker?
They kind of dropped that case pretty quick when no explanation they could give really made sense. It just kind of got brushed aside. So even the farmer that it happened to in the article said no, it had to be something bigger, and they just kind of let it go at that. The newspaper didn't really take it too seriously, and they didn't stick around. But if you look, like for example, again, in that area in Kentucky, Land Between the Lakes, if you Google Land Between the Lakes, you're going to find there have been a number of animal attacks, similar situations, big animals, horses being mauled. Mountain lions won't go after horses. They're too big. It's too fast. And a horse kick an animal the size of a mountain lion, crush a rib cage, break bone. Mountain lion's not going after a horse, not a full-grown horse. Full? Yeah, I can see that. We're talking full-grown horses that were mauled to death. That's not a mountain lion. And there are no grizzly bears in this area. Haven't been 150 years.
Yeah, even the deer out there are not, like out here they're pretty large, out there they're quite small. Have you ever heard of black panthers out there?
I've heard stories about them. I've never actually seen one. But, they used to say there weren't any mountain lions in this area, and I actually saw one of those camping down in Arkansas, North Arkansas, down by the Current River in Jack's Fort. But they're here, and black panthers. There are stories all over the place about those. Farmers have seen them. My cousin saw one. He raises coon dogs, and I don't know if you know much about coon hunters, but they're a pretty odd breed. And they take that very seriously, and I'm not much of a coon hunter. I never really got into that. I deer hunt. Used to hunt turkey. I've hunted just about everything you can hunt in the Ozarks. I just never really got into coon hunting. I just didn't like running dogs, because it's a lot of work, and you're out there for hours chasing those dogs through the woods. But my cousin had a coon dog mauled by one. And he saw it, and I believe him. I mean, when people say they saw those things, I saw a black panther, I don't just immediately go, oh. Missouri Department of Conservation denies the fact that it's there. If they say they saw one, I believe them. And that's a big animal, but it's mountain lion size. It's not the Bengal tiger size. It's mountain lion size. It's just a melanistic mountain lion.
Yeah, we had actually seen one not once but twice on the pig trail there in Arkansas, going over the Ozark Mountains, and off the side of the trail where people usually go hiking during the day, it was just crouched there about to go across the road. And first you see the big old yellow eyes, and then you kind of just see it hunched there on the side of the highway. But people still deny that those are even out there. But like you said, it could be a mountain lion, just of a different color. Or there's people out in certain parts of the United States that do have these exotic creatures shipped to them. A certain guy in Arkansas, had a whole tiger farm and stuff, and he ended up releasing a lot of his instead of them getting taken. And of course, a lot of them got captured, but could be a wild release that could have been around for a while or could have mated with like a mountain lion.
Mm.
And their territory where they go now has actually changed quite a bit. They're not just out here anymore. Now they're out east.
Down in Stone County, Missouri, about 30 minutes from here, there was an animal theme park that went bankrupt, and the people that owned it just abandoned it, just left the animals there. And a friend of mine was a Stone County deputy at the time, and he would go down there and he would feed some of the animals, take food down there because these animals were just left in their cages to die. Well, one night he went down there, and the wolves were all gone. And it was a large population of wolves they had. So and he said later on patrol he saw one of them. So there was wolves released into the Ozarks. And if they have anything approaching a normal birth rate and haven't been killed out, there could be a pretty good size number of wolves in this area, which there hasn't been wolves wild in Missouri in a long time. They were hunted out. But to me, it kind of put a smile on my face to know that they were back.
Yeah. A lot of people threw a big old fit because they were reintroducing them in, I believe it was Montana. And people threw a really big fit about it, about how they're going to get rid of too many wildlife, so on and so forth. But I mean, they used to be there. Why not reintroduce them? But I could see how it could get out of hand. But at the same time, it's really nice to see them back again.
You got to be careful with it, but there have to be a certain number of predators to counteract the number of prey. When they stopped deer hunting for the longest time, the deer population exploded, and as a result, they ate pretty much everything they could reach, and as a result, there just wasn't enough food to go around. A lot of them starved. So the culling of a certain percentage of population is necessary, and that's where the predators come into play. I mean, if the wolves are out there and the mountain lions are out there, they naturally cull a certain amount of them, but the number of them that have been killed off over the years, there just aren't enough of them. Unfortunately, when they find it difficult to catch prey, especially if they are sick or injured or getting old, then they turn to easier prey that doesn't really pay attention to its surroundings and that walks on two legs and looks a lot like us.
Right? Some of us are pretty keen to picking up on different things, but some of us are just oblivious. So yeah, that's a good point there. But like you said, with the deer, also here, herds of elk have been found dead, and I believe they're calling it like wasting disease, and I'm not sure if
chronic wasting disease happens in deer as well, and that's they try to find the populations of that and eliminate them before it spreads to the rest of the herd. But it's common everywhere, unfortunately. Funny you would mention elk. They released elk into Missouri, I want to say about 15 years ago, down near the Arkansas border. You know where Eminence, Missouri is at?
No, I don't think so.
It's on the corner of no and where. It is in the very definition of the boonies in Missouri. That is hill country. Well, you can definitely still hear the banjo music down by the river. They reintroduced elk down there, and they didn't expect the population to take off the way it did, and it's just booming. It's to the point where they're actually kind of becoming a nuisance in that area, and they're spreading out. It wouldn't surprise me if in the next 4 or 5 years they start authorizing limited hunts because the population just really took off. Well, there are no large predators. I mean, there's nothing large enough in Missouri to take out an elk.
No.
At least nothing they'll admit to.
Yeah.
Oh, I would hate to hit an elk with a car. Ooh.
I almost hit one, and it looked just like a statue they have here of this massive elk. And I swear to God, had this thing not reared up, we probably would have died that night, but it reared up on its hind legs, and it was so tall. I just remember looking out my window as I was driving past it. Like, I could not believe that I almost just hit this thing. It had to be like 500 years old. That's how grand and glorious this elk was. It was the biggest elk I'd ever seen. It really blew my mind.
If you hit an animal that size, it would absolutely destroy your car.
Yeah. I was so glad he reared up.
Back in the early 90s, I saw a semi-truck that had hit a moose, and the truck was just absolutely demolished. Coolant leaking. There was blood on the bumper, and I asked the driver, like, where'd the moose go? He said he got up, snorted at me, and walked off. I'm sure it probably went somewhere and died. I mean, it probably took some massive damage, but it didn't kill it instantly. I mean, a semi hit a moose and didn't kill it instantly. That's a big animal. I would hate to hit anything the size of an elk or a moose.
Yeah, those things are pretty hardcore for sure. But on that note, we are going to go to our first musical break. And on this break, we have Mr. Fred Johnson, and he's going to be singing Sugar and After Dark. And then we have a musical, what would you call it? Just an instrumental called Dusty Fingers. You guys don't go anywhere. We'll be right back right after these musical notes.
inspire fondness with love. Where did our love go wrong? My sugar. Why did I make you cry? Whispers flow through my mind when I think about you. That warm feeling in me. My heart sings a sad song and just melts away. Please look into my eyes, my sugar. There's life in out there. Until the sun doesn't shine anymore, I'll be there. When time is a memory, I'll know this love. You will always be the one, my sugar. The feeling is so strong. Waiting here on this cold, lonely night without you. Where did our love go wrong, my sugar? My driver pulls up in my limousine, ready to take me anywhere I want to be. I said, I want to go. Take me to a college scene. I'd like to go and dance, have drinks, and hunt the perfect day. Yeah. Living at the door, I search lonely streets to find hidden shadows in the dark. It doesn't matter what I say. Secret homicides arranged in a series of pursuits. No matter what I say, after dark, I gave her base because she had the range. I knew she was the one that never could go home again. Plastic lifeline limo seats. I don't know why I can't control this urge to hurt again. Yeah. Living at the door, I search lonely streets to find hidden shadows in the dark. It doesn't matter what I say. Chase the star.
Welcome back, and thanks so much for joining us tonight on We Are Paradox Media's Late Night in the Rockies. Tonight we are joined by Mr. D.A. Roberts, and he's an author of many amazing books. And right now we're doing the unveiling of his newest book called Apex Predator Wolf Moon. You can see the cover on We Are Paradox Media's Facebook page, and I'm going to show it right now as well to our viewers on the Periscope page. If you just give me uno momento, I'll pull it up. But it's a very, very good artwork. Can you tell us a bit about the artist that did the artwork for this day?
His name's Michael Fisher. Everybody calls him Fish. He's extremely talented. He's done all the covers of my books that I've released with Jay Ellington, and he just does really great work. He's a tattoo artist by trade, but he does book covers as well. And I was pretty lucky that he knew when I described the story to him, he knew exactly what I needed. So this is all Fish. So Fish, if you're listening, thanks, buddy. You did a hell of a job.
You have to say, that's amazing work. Very good artist. Where did you find this guy?
He works actually for Jay Ellington. He was already working for Jay Ellington when I signed with them. So he's been with them for a number of years. He's got a few books of his own out as well. So Fish is kind of the total package.
Heck yeah. And like I said, we're also doing the link to get this book on Kindle, which is awesome. We were talking about this on break. I'm one of those people, I don't know if it's because I'm old school or what, but it's hard for me to get into different technologies. Like, it took me years to actually get a cell phone. I did not want a cell phone. And then my husband finally bought me one because he's like, there's no way you're running around and I can't get a hold of you because you don't want a cell phone. So I had one of those really ghetto ones with the pull antenna forever, and the little
I remember those.
Broke off, so I glued a bead on there, and oh man, that thing went through hell before I finally got a new one. But the Kindle...
I'm deaf on cell phones. Working in law enforcement, I kill them. I mean, if I get 2 years out of a cell phone, it's ran the gamut to survive.
It's amazing what they do go through in our everyday lives. I actually just recently replaced the screen on my iPhone because I'm such a penny pincher. My friend's like, I got mine done for $50. How much did yours cost? $22 plus my time. But the Kindle is amazing because not only can you change the brightness of it, you can change the font, you can make it larger, smaller, whatever you need in order to be able to read it. It's an amazing piece of technology. I actually used it to read The Great Gatsby, and I'm glad I did.
Nice. Kindle's a fantastic tool. I mean, I love the fact that was created because it really it changed the way people read. So many people will carry a Kindle with them because they can have 200-300 books stored on a Kindle, whereas if they wanted to go to the beach with a book, if they finish the book, if they didn't carry another one, they just don't have another one. But that Kindle, as long as you got the charge, you've got even internet access on some of them. You can download more books, and you've got a virtual library at your fingertips. So we actually do most of my sales on Kindle. Probably I'd say 80% of my sales are on Kindle.
Well, and that's good. As you were saying, you get more of a cut off the Kindle than Amazon will give you. You only get 30 on Amazon, and they get the majority of it.
Well, with the Kindles, I get 70% of the royalties. Actually, JEA gets a piece of that, but it's a 70% split with Amazon.
Yeah.
Whereas they get, it's more closer to 30% with the printed copies.
So, yeah, you guys hang in there. When we get back from our next break, we're going to put that out on our Facebook page as well as over here on Periscope. So we were talking on break about the South and all the crazy things going on there, and this topic of Granny's house came up. And for me, Granny's house is the creepiest place I've ever been. You've got a creepy granny house too. Can you tell us a bit about your granny's house?
Yeah, my grandma West, Carrie West, she was quite the character. The house she had when I was a little kid was over on Jackson Street in Lebanon. It was this massive old house that was built shortly after the Civil War. And you could go over there, and if you spent the night with Grandma, you'd hear stuff moving in the house at night when everybody was in bed. And it was just this creepy old house. You could walk. I would refuse to go in the basement of that house. I mean, it was just, I loved that house because it was my grandma's house, but at the same time, it used to scare the heck out of me. And you couldn't go over there without somebody in the family saying they heard something or saw something.
What are some of the stories surrounding Granny's house that people have not only heard but seen?
Well, Grandma insisted that my grandfather would come visit her, and he'd passed away years before. He would say that he would come and sit on her bed and talk to her at night. And I had no reason to doubt her. I mean, she definitely wasn't crazy. She, even later in years, she was still just crystal clear. But she was a character. And if she said she saw something, I absolutely believed her. So, some of them I'm sure were probably, people that had owned the house before her. But like I said, the house was built shortly after the Civil War, so it had seen some history. The basement and the root cellar both scared the crap out of me.
Is there any particular reason, or is it just because it was dark and...
Just the vibe it gave. I mean, even with the lights on, it was just a kind of a creepy place to be. My grandma would tell us all the time, even though there was nothing down there, she'd say, "You kids stay out of that root cellar." And I don't know if it was because she'd seen something weird down there, or she just didn't want us down there. But so of course, being the little brats we were, we went down there. And I wouldn't stay. I mean, it just always creeped me out. It was just a really, really creepy place, and it was musty. And I even when I think about it now, I'm like, I don't want to go down there.
No.
I'll pass.
So you said you never stayed, so you wouldn't stay the night at your granny's house. You just go to visit and go home? Or...
Oh, no. All of us kids would spend the night, but you couldn't spend the night without hearing something. I mean, you might hear something walk down the hallway, catch a glimpse of something at the other end of the hall. I mean, it was just a creepy old house. And, as old as it was, it's not shocking that it was probably haunted.
Yeah, our granny's house was actually one of those houses that you order out of, I think it was the JCPenney's catalog or one of those catalogs. And you just build it yourself. But they didn't have a basement. Their root cellar was, you go out the back door and you go for a walk past the beehives, and down this hill is where the root cellar was, where they kept all their jars and canned goods and stuff. But yeah, all kinds of creepy things at Granny's house, and we'd call out for Grandma at night, like, "Grandma, help, something's out there." And she said, "Go to sleep, you youngins, there's nothing going on out there." So she was like totally in denial about it, would never admit anything, but we all knew there was something there, even the older kids in my family, and even cousins. Like, nobody... Like, we loved going to Granny's house during the day, but nobody liked spending the night there. Have you heard of the Kentucky Goblin?
I've heard of it. Don't know much about it. It's probably something I'll end up reading about. Like I said, I love anything creepy, but what have you heard about it?
Well, when I was looking online, because, I saw these things when I was little, and the closest thing that I could portray it to as far as things that I'd seen were gremlins, except for their ears were a little shorter, and they had the little pug nose and the slick skin. And one night I see this light coming through my window, which is strange because out my window is the chicken yard, and no light whatsoever to be found out there. And so I crawl down to the edge of my bed and I peek out, and there's this big old bonfire, and there's these little goblin things jumping around the bonfire. Some of them are banging on these little drums, and some have spears or little knife thingies, and they all stop at once and all look the direction that I'm at, and I just slam myself into bed and pull up the armor of sheet and blankets that protects all of us as children, and they went away and left me alone, but they ended up finding my brother and kind of harassing him for a while and chasing him through the house till they finally caught him. One night my grandparents caught him as he would run out of his room into the living room, which is past my room and past Granny and Grandpa's room, come back out through I call it the baking room or the pantry room. That's where Granny kept all her baking goods and stuff, and that's where the stove was for heating the house. And then into the kitchen, come back through. There's a step about this big, which is about 1.5 inches, 2 inches tall, if that. And he'd trip over that every time and be scrambling away. Well, the very last time my grandparents caught him and held him and looked the direction that these things were chasing him, and he just collapsed in their arms, and then never again after that night did he have these night terrors where he'd run through the house. But also after that point, he could not stay out of trouble, like, no matter what he did. I told a friend of mine, a coworker, about this, and she's like, "Oh yeah, that's the same as my cousin, and these are called kobolds." So I called them cobalts for years until I looked online within this last year, and I'm like, oh no, because these look more like gnomes. These kobolds, they wear clothes and such, and these things more like gremlins. So when I saw the Kentucky Goblin, that's the closest thing that I could relay them to, except for they didn't have the whole glowing eyes thing going on. So I found that interesting.
Yeah, I love stories like that. Especially from back in the 1800s and times before that, people would see things in the woods. And I mean, if you look back at Lewis and Clark's journals, even they talk about seeing hairy men. Leif Erikson, the first Vikings that found Vinland, talked about being ran off by what Vikings referred to as huge hairy men. The Vikings were being killed by these things, so the Vikings were ran off by Bigfoot.
Wow.
The Vikings were larger in stature than your average Native American back in those days. I mean, we're talking average height was probably around 5'2", and then you get the Vikings that were probably pushing 6'2", 6'3". These guys will look like giants, and for Vikings to say these were huge men, that's a statement. So. And when I read that, the Leif Erikson account, I thought immediately, they had encountered some sort of cryptid, probably from the description, Bigfoot. So we don't know what's out there. I mean, even the depths of our oceans, we don't know what's out there. And how many hundreds of thousands of square acres of forest land are out there where people haven't been? We like to think that just because we've settled coast to coast all across the United States that we've conquered everything. But there are areas out there that men have never been. I mean, you can go up in the Rocky Mountains. You can go into valleys that white man's probably never set foot in. You just never know. I mean, there's so much out there we don't know.
So it's interesting that you say that about the Vikings and the Bigfoot. Do you think that these certain tribes were in league with the Bigfoot and the Bigfoot's trying to protect them, or they're trying to protect their land? Well,
some of the Native American tribes, especially the ones out in the Pacific Northwest, they talk about Bigfoot being just another tribe. There's discussions of people of other tribes trading with them having a language, that they were peaceful, and the other tribes interacted with them. And then you get to other tribes like the Sioux and especially some of the areas up around the Great Lakes, like the Algonquin, they're not so friendly. I mean, they talk about them, especially in the wintertime, carrying people off to eat. So every tribe's got different stories and even their own words for the same creature. They start talking about, a large, hairy, hair-covered creature or man. They refer to them as the hairy man. And especially, when you're pushing an animal that's in the 6-7 foot range, can easily take out a person, especially if it's a large primate. I mean, I don't have the answers. I don't know what Bigfoot is. There's a lot of speculation going on, but no, we don't know what's right. I mean, some people claim that they're the Nephilim, descended from angels, angels that bred with human and created this race, the Nephilim. There are people out there that think that they're from another dimension. There are people that believe that they were brought here by the flying saucers. There's a school of thought where they think it's an unfound great ape. I read all of these accounts and I don't throw any of them out. I mean, because we don't know. We don't know what it is. I mean, at this point, until we've got better answers, we don't know what it could be. But I do firmly believe it's out there. And I think it's just a matter of time till science discovers it. I mean, heck, science is finding new species of animals all the time. They just recently found a species of primate that we didn't know existed, the Billy ape, Bili. And it was a very aggressive offshoot of the chimpanzee. Even Jane Goodall talked about the chimpanzees sometimes would carry children off from villages, so people would be very careful with their children at night. So chimpanzees have even been known to prey on other primates. These, as cute as they look, even a normal-sized chimp, is 10 times stronger than your average human. I mean, look at people, chimp attacks, people that have wanted to have chimps as pets, and sometimes it ends disastrously. I mean, these are animals that, in a rage can pummel you to death. You look up some of the attacks on people that have had chimps as pets. They'll bite your fingers off, tear parts of your face off. And this is not an animal that's really designed to be a pet. I mean, it's an order of higher primate with intelligence that's probably not far beyond our own. Chimps are proven tool users. So if you've got a bigger, larger primate out there, and I'm not going to go down on the side that says Bigfoot is a primate, but if you've got a primate out there that's got an intelligence level at least on the level of chimps, say they're tool users, and a lot of Native American tribes back that up, saying that they traded with them and they have their own language. So that puts them above chimps. That puts them up on human intelligence. Maybe not technologically advanced, but that would put them up on at least human intelligence level. So this is an animal pushing 800 pounds, 7 to 800 feet, 7 to 8 feet tall, not 7 to 800 feet, 7 to 8 feet tall, 800 pounds. If it's got the strength of a normal primate, chimps weigh in the 100-pound range, or average of 10 times as strong as a human. What would a primate 800 pounds be capable of? Flipping a car? So one-on-one, I'm not even sure I'd want to go up against one with a firearm. It'd have to be a pretty big firearm. So if it is a primate, then we're hopelessly outmatched going up against one trying to defend ourselves. Out in the deep woods, you're in their element, not ours. If it's not a primate, if it's one of the other theories, the Nephilim or alien or even from another dimension, who knows what it's capable of? This is an animal that's potentially, it's a creature that's potentially very, very dangerous. And a lot of the Native American beliefs and stories of these back that up, talking about human predation, carrying people off. I mean, they're more than capable of it. So if you're going out there looking for something like that, you better be careful.
Yeah, for sure. And I like what you were saying about how different tribes said they were just another tribe, which makes sense to me because we did have so many different humanoid tribes out there back in caveman days and such. You have Homo erectus, so many different hominoids. Some interbred, some stayed to their own. And I think some of these could have still survived. I mean, they're just really good at doing what they do and staying away from, us and our lifestyle. Like a lot of times I do think that they get curious and they come in and check it out. But I do think it's possible that these certain tribes do still exist because, like you're saying, there's so many parts of the world that we haven't even touched, even the ocean, but even land, like so many parts of the land we have not conquered or discovered, where we're still finding different species. Like there's an antelope species with a gill on its face. I mean, what is that even for? It's just amazing the different things that we're still finding.
Yeah, every once in a while, if you look on like National Geographic and look up new species, they find new species all the time. Insects mostly, 99% of the new species they discover are some form of insect, but they're discovering new species all the time. And every once in a while we find something really, really big, like the billy ape. And it's particularly aggressive. That's just, you never know. I mean, they find stuff in the deep Amazon, and look at Canada. I mean, Canada's thinly populated. I mean, the entire country of Canada has got, about a third of our population, maybe a quarter, and it's bigger than the United States. There are areas of northern Saskatchewan, of the deep forests up there. There may not have been a living human being, Native American, white man, whatever. There may not have been a human in there in 100 years or more. And you get tales about, like flights going missing, like in the Pacific Northwest. There's been a number of crashes that they ain't ever found. And just because those forests are so dense. If you can get a plane crash in the woods and you can't see a debris trail where it went down, that's some dense woods. Mm-hmm. So it's easy how something that big could have gone unseen, could have gone unnoticed. And to me, it's completely within the realm of possibility. I can't come down one way or the other and say what it is, but I believe it's out there, and I believe it's a matter of time until we've got documented proof. I mean, there's sightings all the time, and let's just say let's take 99% of the sightings and say these are complete bogus. We're going to throw out 99% of the sightings. Well, if we kept 1% as legitimate sightings, there would still be hundreds and thousands of sightings. There's been tens of thousands of sightings of these things over the last hundreds of years. I mean, it predates the Patterson-Gimlin film. It way predates the first recordings of written language among the natives. I mean, they've been seeing these things for a long, long, long time. There's a town in Alaska called Port Chatham, and it's a ghost town now. At one time, it was a booming cannery. It was a boom town. I mean, there were people. It was a thriving community. Where they were fishing and hunting, and it was a decent sized town, and it is a ghost town now because throughout the 1930s and 40s, people would go out to the woods to go hunting, and they would find headless corpses, or they would find body parts washing up along the banks of the river. Something out there started taking. And these were not just people going out collecting mushrooms with a pocket knife. These were people that went out to hunt big animals. People that were well armed were getting ambushed and killed. And as more and more of these people started disappearing, people started leaving the town. So, and a lot of theory is that it was an aggressive strain of Bigfoot that basically wiped out the town of Port Chatham. Those that didn't die fled. And it takes a lot to make an entire town flee. And you look up the legends of Port Chatham, the stories behind Port Chatham. There's still people that lived there that have told accounts of creatures. They've done a number of Bigfoot expeditions up in that area, and each time they come away with something different. And it's not a place that I would want to stay lightly, and I certainly wouldn't do it unarmed.
And where exactly is this located again?
Port Chatham, Alaska. It's a ghost town now. It's on the Kenai Peninsula. It's about as deep in the thick underbrush as you can get. I mean, the only way to get to it's by boat. There are literally no roads to it. It is that rugged.
Yeah, that's pretty insane, especially like you're saying, like different body parts washing up and such. Ooh. And it's amazing, too, to me as well, that these things are not only here in the United States, but they're all over the world, and there's different variations of them. They talk about the abominable snowman, who's white. Well, actually, here in Colorado, Enrico, Colorado, we were doing a security gig up there, had some encounters with a Bigfoot. We never saw it, but we heard it throwing boulders down after we had been there for a period of time. It was kind of sick of us. Went up for a paranormal investigation a year or so after and talked to a mother and daughter who said not only had they seen a Bigfoot, but it was a white one. And they said it only took a few steps for it to clear this opening in the aspen trees where you could actually see for a moment. A few steps, which would have taken us like much more. But I believe that they did see this, and that, there's albinos of every race or every creature, like snakes are even albino dogs, cats, mice. So there could be albino Bigfoot. Are they the same tribe that's grown differently because of different things that they've mixed with? Or, it's very interesting. Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of areas that have, around the area that around the U.S. that have names like Devil Creek or Devil's Cauldron, and a lot of the early settlers referred to these things as like wood devils or wood boogers or wild men, and you see a lot of names on maps with names similar to that. There's a place down. You've heard of the legend of the Lost Dutchman mine down in the Superstition Mountains in Arizona. Mm-mm. Well, there's the Lost Dutchman mine supposedly is a gold mine that was producing huge amounts of gold ore. That's somewhere up in the Superstition Mountains, and the guy died that owned the mine. And people have tried for decades to try to locate that mine, because it's supposedly worth millions in gold. But there's a valley down there that the Native Americans tell people to stay out of, because they said there are creatures there. You don't go in there; they're territorial. And the times that they've gone looking for people that went missing in that valley, they found the bodies headless. Something's ripping the heads off of grown adults. Coincidentally, there's a valley up in Canada. Same thing. Native Americans tell people don't go in that valley, and when they would go looking for people that were stupid enough to do it, they're finding the bodies without heads. to me, if we've had people go missing out in parts of the woods when they find the body, there's no head. Probably a pretty good indicator you don't want to go up there. Not anything less than a large party.
Yeah. Just take the body and go.
Yeah. Take that as your warning and be on your way.
So it's interesting that they are marking these as like Devil's Creek or Devil's Valley. And there's a place that I do pass going down to Arizona that I think it's Devil's Valley. It might be Devil's Creek. I'll have to check it out next time I go there and write it down. That's interesting to know. If
you look at the map, there are literally places everywhere with names like that. Heck, there's a state park an hour and a half, 2 hours from here called Ha Ha Tonka State Park. And there's just a lot of legends in that area, a lot of sightings in that area, and there's a place there called the Devil's Kitchen, and it's in a cave, and it's a pretty creepy area, but it's also kind of a neat area because there's a lot of trails there. But a number of people I knew growing up had weird occurrences in that area.
So when there was this mine up there, did they have any stories about attacks from these giant creatures?
If you look at the Superstition Mountains themselves, look up the number of people that have gone missing in that area. It's a pretty impressive number. You want to look up some things that'll give you nightmares. Start looking up the Missing 411 series. He's a former cop, retired, and he started looking into disappearances in national parks. And he's found that these disappearances occur in large clusters. Sure, some of these disappearances could be people that just got lost hiking, but when you start talking about armed hunters that had hunted the same area for years, getting lost and disappearing completely, never to be found a single trace of, experienced backpackers, hikers, experienced skiers, people that just vanish off the face of the map and are never seen. It's pretty frightening. I mean, it's trying to remember the guy's name, David Paulides, the Missing 411 series, and that's. He never out and out says what he thinks it is, but if you look at the evidence, there's not a lot of things it could be. I mean, only a certain amount of disappearances could be explained as animal predation. It's got to be something thinking. It's got to be something big to take on people that are armed or experienced in the woods and make them disappear without a trace. I mean, some of these guys were more than capable of fighting back. And then there are accounts of hunters that have gone vanished in the woods, only to be found later, wrapped backwards around a tree and their guns smashed to pieces. Can't tell me a grizzly bear did that. Didn't pick up a gun and smash it against a tree. That's not bear behavior. And we're not talking people that were mauled. We're talking people that were literally snapped in half backward. Well, not in half, but bones broken as they were wrapped backwards around a tree. That takes a lot of force to pick someone up by the ankles and swing them like a baseball bat. This is not normal occurrences, and these happen all over the place. And a lot of times they just get completely shut up or dismissed by the media as people being crazy. But one or two I'll buy. One or two, maybe somebody had a little too much to drink and that they thought they saw something. But when you're talking about thousands upon thousands of sightings by credible people, we're not just talking the guy that they always interview, from somewhere, and the type, the guy they interviewed from somewhere near West Memphis that saw, yes, I saw the UFO. It was hanging over the trailer park. It's not guys like that. We're talking doctors, lawyers, a few judges, people, that have a lot to lose by coming forward with these, that are coming forward years later after they retired and said, this is what I saw. I know people in law enforcement that have had sightings that won't talk about it because they don't want to be, you lose your credibility as a cop. You're never going to be able to testify on the witness stand. And I'm not going on the record saying that anything like this has ever happened to me personally. I just love the accounts. And I love going out in the woods and looking for things like this. Whether or not I ever find anything, God knows. But I do believe it's out there.
Yeah. I believe anything's possible, and for these things to exist, I mean, especially with all the stories that are out there, even predating, us, Native American stories. I heard recently from somebody that the female Bigfoot is actually quite jealous of human females, and so a lot of times that's why they will snatch their kids. I thought it was just like a motherly thing, and they take the kids and love them and take care of them, but supposedly they'll snatch these kids and then kill them. I'm not sure exactly.
Well, look at the behavior of primates, chimps in particular, neighboring other tribes, or even sometimes rival females. They would kill and eat the offspring of others. I mean, chimp behavior is documented. This is not something that we've heard about through Aboriginal tribes and tribes out in the Congo saying, oh, this happened, and we go, no. It's been documented by researchers. Jane Goodall described behavior. I mean, she even said she locked up her own child at night because she was afraid that the chimps would carry him off. I mean, this is noted behavior. It's happened. It's been observed in primate species. So it's not unfathomable that it could happen with Bigfoot.
Yeah, have this happy romantic version, that they're taking him and loving him, and in reality, they're like, well, that was a delicious baby.
That was tasty.
Tasty. Now it's in my belly. It's pretty interesting. And it being that they are somewhat human and somewhat ape, I mean, man, makes you wonder.
Well, when you look at the Dogman accounts, there's one thing that appears almost universally. There's so many accounts that they talk about when people have encountered Bigfoot. Some people are inspired terror. Some people think that it was just this gentle giant of the woods, but they describe the encounter as being memorable. But the one thing that I most universally find in Dogman encounters is they all say that looking into these creatures' eyes was like looking into pure evil. That these things are just nothing but malice. The Dogmen, if the Dogmen are out there, they're the apex predator. They are the top predator. How to take one down, I don't know unless you're using huge firepower. But if you go mano a mano with a creature that's every bit as tall or in the same ballpark as a Bigfoot, and it's canid, that's a predator. It's a prey creature, and it will take people out. I mean, there are documented cases like the Beast of LBL, another one called the Siege of Lockett Ranch, which supposedly happened back in the 1940s, where people were attacked. And it happens. I mean, these creatures are out there, and most places dismiss it as just pure hokum or Native American tales, or people were drunk or stupid or high, any combination of the above. But there are a lot of accounts that come from credible sources. You can't just dismiss that outright. There's more out there than we realize. And if these Dogmen are out there, how they've gone undiscovered is because they're smart. They stay away from large numbers of people. If there's 10 of you walking through the woods, they're probably going to leave you alone. But you're walking through the deep woods alone, you might just wind up on the dinner table.
Yeah, it's pretty scary to think about. I actually, read a bunch of different paranormal things. I don't know how many paranormal sites that I check out on Facebook, but I've heard recently from several different accounts people seeing these dog-like creatures, somewhat like Anubis, somewhat like wolf-like, but wearing armor and carrying spears and being in numbers. Have you heard anything like this?
I've heard accounts where people had seen them wearing types of armor and using weapons. Again, that falls back on the intelligence. If they realize that bullets can kill them, they might start wearing something, even if it's made of tree bark, that'd slow a bullet down or stop it. I mean, I wouldn't rule it out. There are accounts where people have seen them with spears. But if they got natural weapons like claws and teeth, they may not necessarily need them, but I wouldn't say that they couldn't. I mean, they have opposable thumbs. They have hands, which means if they've got any intelligence at all, they know how to make weapons. It's not a dumb animal by any case of the word. Any point of the picture here. These are not dumb animals. They're very intelligent, and they're more than capable of taking down intelligent prey.
Someone had mentioned in here that where you're at is near the 37th parallel. Do you think that would have anything to do with these mutilations or different sightings?
It's possible. I mean, we can't rule. I wouldn't rule anything out. I just think that because of the topography of the Ozarks, the number of caves, there are just humongous numbers of caves throughout the Ozarks, deep forests, valleys. There's just so much places where something like this could hide. You could go unnoticed forever if it's smart. I mean, there's plenty of places to hide and plenty of prey.
It is interesting, though, how many different creatures and different activities and things like that even UFO activity, how much increased it seems to be on that parallel. Even the parallels around it seem to be affected.
Well, I don't
Go
I
ahead.
don't know how the parallels are affected. It's not something I've ever really looked in, but it seems to be like almost the heart of America seems to be where the bulk of these sites are. And there's sightings. If you go due east of us, you're going to run into West Virginia and South Carolina, and if you look up sightings from there, there's a lot of them. There are a lot down in Florida, but I think it's just me personally. I think it's because there's so much to eat. There's so much foliage and things to support them. You don't get as many accounts in places like deep deserts. There's no place to hide, and there's not a lot to eat. I personally, I just think it's you're going to see a lot more sightings in areas where there's abundance of places to hide and things to eat, like the big thicket areas of Texas. There's a lot of sightings down
there. Jason was saying, I found a manticore on one of the old Antarctica maps. Do you know what a manticore is?
From mythology, a manticore was, I believe, a winged lion with spikes on its tail.
Oh, wow.
I'd have to look that up. It's been a while since I've looked on something like that, but I think a manticore was a winged lion, if I recall correctly. I could be wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong. If anybody out there listening, I'm more than happy to be proven wrong on that. Just what pops into my head immediately.
Yeah, I'm like, I have no idea what that is. I had to ask you. But yeah, Gnome Drew was saying the white ones are usually the older alpha males, more often than not kicked out of the fold for, once being alpha male and being replaced by a younger. Yeah.
Look at gorillas. I mean, they don't. You don't really see them become silverbacks till they get older. So yeah, I can see that. Heck, all the gray in my beard, I can easily see a Bigfoot getting gray hair.
Jason was also saying some of these dogmen are controlled, which makes me think of when somebody had told me at one point that it was actually a government experiment that had escaped from somewhere. So perhaps that's what he's talking about. These dogmen
I don't think
controlled.
They were. I think possibly the government may have captured some and figured out ways to control them. Maybe the use of control collars or training. I maybe captured them when they were small. But the dogman sightings go back way too far for them to have been a government experiment. I mean, they couldn't have been doing genetic experiments back in the 1800s. Some of these sightings go back pretty far, and there's a weird thing I've noticed in some of the sightings. People would say they have described their encounters seeing something either in the edge of the woods or at the side of the road. A lot of time eating roadkill, and when they first see it, they would think it was just a large wolf. Because it would be down on all fours, it'd be eating whatever or moving. A lot of the descriptions of you just talk about seeing them moving around on all fours, but a number of the accounts I read talked about hearing a strange popping sound, and then they stood up. I think that its hands reorient themselves so they went on all fours. I think they're capable of moving on all fours. And some of the accounts, when they talk about the hands, they don't describe them as being like a human hand. They talk about them being, the digits being different, like a raccoon's hand. And that's kind of fascinating to me. I think one of the reasons why we can't find anything like this in the fossil records is because you're capable of returning that hand to a paw structure. That's just my personal theory. I mean, that's not substantiated by anything than just by me reading accounts and looking at the morphology and talking about the way they saw these things move. Because more often than not, they describe seeing a really large wolf running on all fours, and a number of accounts have described that same popping sound before they stood up. So I personally think that the hands are capable of returning to a paw structure. Maybe they can dislocate the joints or.
Yeah, it's very intriguing and unsettling. But Punker Anthony over on Periscope is like, what? He said, study anthropology. You can't sustain and breed where's the evidence, and why even speculate?
That's always the defense that people throw out. Where's the evidence? The sightings are evidence, whether they want to admit it or not. A number of places have gotten, not necessarily good quality photographs, but people have gotten tons and tons of foot castings. Some of Dogman, some of Bigfoot. And Dr. Jeff Meldrum, I believe he's from Idaho, one of the universities in Idaho. He's a anthropologist. He said that these casts couldn't have been faked because there's morphology within the track that doesn't exist in a human foot. It's something called a mid-tarsal break, which means their foot flexes differently than ours do. That's not something that some guy that whittled a pair of big honking footprints out of a wooden cast would know. They're also finding dermal ridges, fingerprints. They're distinct ridges on some of these casts that are in thick mud. You can't fake that. I mean, whether you want to believe it or not, there's proof out there. You can say, okay, well, where's the sightings? Okay, well, there's thousands of sightings. Okay, well, where's the physical evidence? Okay, well, we've got footprints, we've got hair, we've got DNA samples. Okay, where's the body? Well, we don't have one. Oh, see, they're fake.
Yeah,
that's a circular argument until you can always say that there's no evidence out there, but there have literally been documented cases done for centuries. So if you're an unbeliever, that's your prerogative. I choose to believe that we live in a larger world, that there are things out there that we can't explain.
Yeah, for sure. And then he also brought up Bigfoot and Loch Ness. These things have to breed or they can't still exist. But actually, I was watching, I like to watch Nuke's Top 5. I'll watch Chill's Top 10, Top 15, whatever. I love watching paranormal stuff. And there was actually a video of this. Somebody's filming the water and they see this thing going through the water. And all of a sudden it swims up to where the light is. And you can see at first like these eyes looking up, and then it replays it several times. You're trying to figure out what this is, and I'm like, oh my god, it looks just like the Loch Ness, like what I've imagined it as, like the head, and then the long neck, and then the fin type arm thingies, and then the way the body's shaped. Even it looked like a little baby Loch Ness. It was super cute and strange at the same time. But there is evidence out there. Even people don't believe me about the deer here in Bayfield that use the crosswalk to cross the road. I almost got a picture of it the other day, but by the time you get your camera out there to try to get that evidence that people can't deny, it's already done and over with. I mean, and it makes me think of Bigfoot and other creatures that people are trying to capture. It just takes that second for it to be there and gone. Like, you really don't have time a lot of times to capture it.
The FBI recently released and declassified its own reports that it did on the investigation of the Bigfoot incident around Bluff Creek. We're talking during the time of the Patterson-Gimlin footage when they first coined the phrase Bigfoot. The FBI put a lot of man hours into researching this, and they just recently, within the last year or so, released that report. And the report basically says, and if you want to go back and read it, it's a pretty lengthy report, but the report basically says, while there was significant evidence to support the existence of this creature, they believe it's dead. Why would there only be one?
Right.
Where'd the one come from? It had to come from parents somewhere. So if the FBI is going to come right out and say, yeah, the creature in the Bluff Creek area did exist, but we think it's dead, that all that really says is the FBI believes it's out there.
Right. Or else why admit that it's dead?
Right.
Gnome Drew was saying about the LDL. He said it was a family that was killed in the LDL and in the early 1800s.
No, look up the Beast of LBL. This supposedly happened back in the 80s, and it happened in an RV, and it was a pretty big deal. I think I know the one he's talking about. There are people that have been reported missing and killed in that area a number of times. Hunters that have gone missing and later found basically dismembered. there's a lot of accounts over the centuries in that area, even before they made the dams that created the lakes that made it the land between the lakes. Back when that was just river valleys, there were dozens and dozens of accounts from people that lived in that area. So this is not new. It just got really kind of more focused after the lakes were made by the creation of those dams. And when they created those dams, they kicked a lot of people out of that area. Wouldn't let them live there anymore. Made it a state park. If you go through the woods back there, you'll find ruins of homes. If you look up the land between the lakes, you'll find a lot of documentation on it out there. But look up the beast of land between the lakes, or the beast of LBL, and you will guarantee you will find that account where the family was killed in the motor coach.
Robert was coming back with the manticore, plural being manticores. Greek mythology, a beast with the body of a lion, usually red, the tail of a scorpion, and the head/face of a man with a mouth filled with multiple rows of sharp teeth like a shark, and said to be able to shoot spikes from its tail or mane to paralyze prey. Thanks, Robert.
I know it's something I wouldn't want to run into.
Heck no. That's interesting. I wonder what sort of proof they have of that being up there. But he said he found it on the map. There's so many different creatures, even back in the day of sailors and such, these different creatures that they put on certain parts of the map, and it makes you wonder what was there. Even Antarctica, being once a jungle, now a frozen iceland.
Yeah, they discovered a species of large dinosaur under the ice. Of course, the fossils. But it's called Cryolophosaurus. They named it Cryo because of the ice in Antarctica. But it was a big predator. It was almost the size of a T-Rex, a big meat eater. So they're discovering stuff down there all the time. It's only a matter of time till they learn more. But it's when you've got a place that's covered with that much ice, it's almost impossible to do anything without drilling or digging. And if you look up the Pie-Rice map, it was a map that belonged to I believe it was a Egyptian general that showed Antarctica without ice on it. Showed what the map, the full map of the coastline of Antarctica without ice on it. And the U.S. Navy did high energy acoustic sounding of Antarctica and said that the map's not correct. That there's some areas of the map where it's wrong. When they went back and rechecked, they found out the map was right and their sounding had been wrong. So the Pie-Rice map exists. That's something they found. Egyptologists found that shows Antarctica without ice. So that's there's a little that you can't solve the mystery of that. You can say maybe it was just blind luck, but he had to get that information from somewhere.
For sure. Dave is asking, have you heard anything about the Russian ski group thought to be killed by an unknown humanoid?
Oh, I believe it's the Dalatov Pass. A friend of mine actually wrote a book about that. I don't know if they'll ever really know what happened to the Dalatov Pass crew, but the Russians buried the evidence for a long time, and they recently reopened the case. There's some theories where they think they were killed by a creature, and then there are others that think maybe the elements got them or a freak snowstorm. This was an experienced team of hikers, people that have hiked this type of territory many, many times. They knew what they were doing. So we may never know what actually happened. I tend to lean toward something out of the ordinary. I won't say for sure that it was a large cryptid, but I wouldn't rule it out. I mean, it's a very, very dangerous and extremely remote area.
Yeah, Jason also said, I have pictures of various creatures on Antarctica. I'm wondering if this is referring back to the map he was talking about before. But
that
on
would
that
be fantastic.
Note, yeah, that would be awesome. It'd be cool if you could share those so I can...
Yeah, share those on your Facebook page. I'd love to check those out.
Yeah, that'd be sweet. But we are going to go...
You can send them to mine.
Yeah, for sure. I want to see it too. But we're going to go to our second musical break, and I think this would be a good time to put out the link for everyone to be able to check out the Kindle. That way they have around 12 minutes in order to check that out and order their very own Kindle copy.
Do you want to reveal the cover?
Yeah, we did that before, but we could do that again.
Oh, I didn't see it come up on my end.
Oh, I put it on our Facebook page. I should have tagged you in that.
Oh,
I'll
okay.
tag you in that during the break. All right.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't show it to you. I showed it to the Periscope. All right. So this is where you could get your Kindle copy. I'm going to put this on not only our Periscope, but our Spreaker as well as our Facebook for everybody that's listening. So you guys make sure during this musical break you go and check out this awesome book that's written by the author we have on tonight, Mr. D.A. Roberts. On this musical break, for your listening pleasure, as you are checking out this book, we have Gravity, which is a group that's out of Poland, of all places. They're from Krakow, Poland. And these guys rock it out pretty good. So we have Throw You Away, My Last Goodbye, and Take a Walk in My Shoes by Gravity. You guys don't go anywhere. We'll be right back right after this musical break.
See, anything I do, you say you can save me. So why don't you try? No matter what you tell me, tonight I'm gonna say my last goodbye. Oh. You say you can save me, so why don't you try? No matter what you tell me, tonight I'm gonna say my last goodbye. Oh. My last goodbye. So I walk down the street, thinking all the things you said you need. Why don't you tell me, baby, how do you feel? So I walk down the street, thinking all the things you said you need. Why don't you tell me, baby, how do you feel? Don't you take a walk? Why don't you take a walk? In my shoes, why don't you take a walk? Before you tell me what to do, don't you take a walk? Don't you take a walk? In my shoes, why don't you take a walk? Before you tell me what to do, no, it's easy. You tell me what to do. Have you ever stopped to think all the things that I've been through? No, it's easy. You tell me what to do. Have you ever stopped to think all the things that I've been through? Don't you take a walk? Don't you take a walk? In my shoes, don't you, baby, take a walk? Before you tell me what to do, don't you take a walk? Don't you take a walk? In my shoes, don't you, baby, take a walk? Before you tell me what to do.
Welcome back, and thanks so much for joining us tonight on We Are Paradox Media's Late Night in the Rockies. Tonight we are joined by author D.A. Roberts, and we are discussing many different cryptids, including the apex predator Wolfman, and the book is Apex Predator Wolf Moon. And we just posted a link on our We Are Paradox Media Facebook page, and we also shared that on Dave's page, and Dave's been posting that as well. We also have that on Spreaker and shortly here on Periscope. But D.A., welcome back, and thanks so much for being on.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So these are, if you look on my page, and I'll just send these to you really quick so you don't have to mess with all that, D.A., but
okay.
he's actually sent like 3 different pictures. One looks like an actual picture, and the rest is like artwork and the map as well. But I'll send those over to you. The one that looks like an actual fossil is pretty interesting, and these pictures are as well. I'm going to get a deeper look after I send these to you, but pretty interesting what you find under the ice, including different elements. Okay, so I just sent those 3.
Lord knows what's down there.
All right, so I sent you those 3 on Messenger.
And they're popping up.
Pretty interesting.
Wild. That's insane. I'm definitely going to have to Google that and do some reading tonight.
Some more of those creative juices flowing.
Absolutely. Might be more books involved.
For sure. Man, places you can go in Antarctica. So we have tonight released for the first time the cover of Apex Predator Wolf Moon by author D.A. Roberts. The artwork is done by Fish. Is the name?
Michael Fish Fisher.
Michael Fish Fisher. And this artwork is quite amazing. If you guys want to check it out, go to We Are Paradox Media on Facebook. That's where we've also shared the link, which we've done that on Spreaker as well. But quite a lengthy conversation we've been having about all these different cryptids and topics. And we've had different people commenting on this. And again, back to the LBL attack. Gnome Drew, a.k.a. Andrew, had posted that they found the little girl 30 feet up in the tree.
Mm-hmm. The only reason they found her is one of the officers that was looking for her felt something hit him on the face. He thought it was a raindrop till he looked up and more hit. And he touched it and it was covered. His fingers came back covered in blood.
Wow. I bet he had nightmares about that until he died.
I would imagine he probably did.
Yes. Quite horrific. So was it just laying across a branch like a mountain lion would do, or had it been just thrown up there willy-nilly?
It looked like it had been fed on, and it was, like I said, about 30 feet up on a branch.
Wow. Very sad. Okay,
they're not even sure what provoked the attack.
Right. I wonder if it was noise or just being in the wrong area.
Well, it was a campground, so I wouldn't think it would. It was an established campground that had been there for years. I wouldn't think that it would. Have been a change in behavior. So it had to have been something else that drew it in.
Yeah. Well, we have neighbors.
They said that
next
campground's
door.
abandoned now.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can still find it and find the old concrete pads, but the campground is now overgrown. They don't allow anybody to camp there anymore.
Do you think that had anything to do with this attack?
Who knows? Could have had everything to do with it.
Yeah.
Maybe it wasn't the only attack. Maybe the others just didn't get reported.
Jason, who had sent the pictures of the 2 map pictures as well as the fossil picture, he said the fossil picture he found was from Google Earth. So this is an actual satellite camera that took this picture.
Wow.
Pretty interesting.
Well, if Google Earth had enough resolution to see that in the ice, I wonder how big it was.
It looked huge because it looked like there was a couple mountain bridges or something within that picture. Could be snowdrifts.
So it's got to be a really big animal.
Jason also said, "There goes my Kentucky camping trip plans."
Well, I would say you'd probably be fine as long as you didn't camp in the LBL.
So what other cryptids are in your neck of the woods or, around the Bible Belt central area there?
Well, one of the things that I've noticed with the reports is, well, especially Bigfoot reports, is they're far more aggressive in this area than they are out in the Pacific Northwest. People, out there, we tended to refer to them as the gentle giants of the forest and that kind of thing. But the interactions around here have often been negative. Animals attacked, people ran off, and in some cases attacked. It's a more, I would say, more aggressive variant of the species down here, and some researchers have gone as far as to say there are 6, 7, 8, 10 types of species of Bigfoot out there, and I don't know. How do you say there are 10 types of a creature we haven't even formally proven exists yet? But I can definitely cite different behaviors in the accounts. Different parts of the world, they talk about different types of behaviors, especially up in the more colder climes like Alaska, Canada. They talk about it being far more aggressive because any big animal that lives in that area, in an area that has particularly harsh winters, is going to have a much higher caloric intake to maintain its body weight and survive. So you're talking an animal that's going to have to eat. And especially if it's a meat eater, it's going to have to eat a lot of it. This is common in grizzly bears, because they hibernate. But these are animals that are capable of taking down large prey, moose. But we don't get grizzlies down here. But we still sometimes see large animal kills. Grizzlies haven't been this far south in generations. We've been getting an increasing number of black bears around here. I've seen a couple myself. The town where I work as an officer has had a number of sightings. It's a fairly rural community, but black bears are not that uncommon around here. You run into them fairly regularly, especially if you go camping. Black bears aren't aggressive unless you're messing with their cubs. They will generally leave people alone. They're not generally anywhere near as big as a grizzly. I mean, a couple 100 pounds. It's a good sized black bear. But again, they're more plants and berries. They'll eat meat. They'll eat small animals, especially if they find a kill. But they're generally not that aggressive. I mean, they can be. Like I said, you get between one and its cubs, or you chase one, or as the expression goes, poke the bear. You can certainly make any animal aggressive. But for the most part, if you yell at a black bear, it'll just run off. So I couldn't possibly see how black bears could be responsible for some of the attacks around here. There's just. It's a rich area for all types of sightings. I mean, Bigfoot sightings, dogman sightings. I've heard of what people refer to, like you called them goblins. I've heard people refer to them as the little people. Native Americans refer to them as the little people.
I've seen little people, and I've seen these goblins. They're totally different.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Some people will describe them as types of tricksters. They're mischievous. It's just there's lots of different lore from different parts of the country. Skinwalker lore. I tend to spend my most of my time reading about animals that give me a chill. Like when they start talking about some stuff like chupacabra and stuff like that, that'll pique my interest. But anything small or that's just known to be cited and not been anything other than problematic, I generally don't read about them as much. So most of my knowledge comes with larger cryptids, animals that have been claimed to attack humans and farm animals or cause disappearances. So most of my experience and knowledge comes from that type of cryptid.
Nomdre also mentioned the mother and the camper put up one hell of a fight with the creature, pretty much to the point that it tore the skin on the fingers down to the bone.
And she ripped her nails completely out.
But I was thinking, it totally reminds me of my neighbors, and believe it or not, the last name is Heathen. So I like to refer to them as the Heathens quite a bit because I think it's funny. But their kid, I swear to God, this kid screams all the time. And I'll even go out there and tell him, hey, and even my oldest daughter, not my oldest, but my 16-year-old, she's like, hey, don't scream like that unless something's wrong, because we'll run out there thinking one of the kids is dying and he's just playing. But perhaps this little girl played like that and just had like a screaming tendency, and maybe that's what made it go off. I mean, it could be some simple thing like that, or perhaps even a smell. Did they have any dog or anything like that?
I never mentioned a pet, but I've heard somebody theorize that perhaps it was, a sense that drew it in because it was fairly early in the camping season, probably earlier than most people would normally be there. So maybe the creature was still active in that area and got out of the area when it knew there'd be a lot of people around. But the account doesn't give a lot of detail about scents, and it doesn't really go into much speculation on what drew it in. But it said that it was first spotted by a car, by people passing in a car. They saw the father had been pretty well dismembered, and they called it. They drove out and called the local police. And when the police came in, they cordoned the area off after they saw the account. And then later the military got involved. So, who knows? I mean, did they go after the creature and kill it? Maybe. Did they cordon the area off just to keep people out of there? I don't know. I would love to know more. In fact, here last year, my wife and I, for our 25th anniversary, we went to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Nice. For our anniversary. When we drove back, I wanted to stop at LBL. I wanted to stop and go explore, but it was like 3 o'clock in the morning when we went through that area. And by that point, I just wanted to go home and go to bed because we were still, several hours from home. But I remember driving through that area, just driving through with my high beams on, no other cars on the highway late at night. That whole area was just creepy. And maybe I was creeped out because I knew the stories that had happened there. Maybe not, but I was certainly on high alert. But I was watching both sides of the roads, kind of just honestly kind of hoping I would see something. But that area just got a really creepy feel at night.
Yeah, you just have that feeling like at any moment it's going to come out, and it never does.
Yeah, like you're in an area you probably shouldn't be. It was a very, very lonely stretch of road, woods on both sides of the road, and very few cars at that time of the morning. So I was a little creeped, and everybody in the van was asleep. So
yeah, and like you said, it was 3 o'clock in the morning, even creepier.
Yeah. But I really did want to stop and go check it out. But being that late, I'm sure the park was closed, and they probably wouldn't, like me poking around with a flashlight, and
I just want to
have gotten myself arrested.
Right?
Yeah, I wanted to go find that campsite, and I will eventually. I'll get back to that area. I want to shoot some video up there.
It's on the
There are a
bucket
lot
list.
of sightings in that area. Oh, absolutely.
Of the dog
Hopefully
man,
not
or
that
just all
distant
kinds
future.
of things?
Oh, all kinds of things. I want to be able to go and walk some of these places where sightings have occurred. I want to go. And if I can get an encounter of my own, that's great. But I want to get a feel for these places because some places you can feel the same creepiness whether it's day or night. And then some places you get there and you're like, there's nothing spooky about this place. But I want to go and get a firsthand feeling for the areas. And if I can find something, get it on film, then so much the better.
Mm-hmm. It's really good for writing, too, to get those different feelings.
Oh, absolutely.
It allows you to paint a certain picture.
Mm-hmm.
David brought up, how about the Joplin Spook Lights?
That's actually closer to Neosho, Missouri, and they've seen that for years. Some people call it a will-o'-the-wisp. Some people think it's swamp gas. There's really not much swamps in that area. Missouri's not known for its swamps. I've been down through that area and never saw it. But I know a lot of people that have. I mean, I won't say it doesn't exist. It's been seen by lots of people over the years. That area is mostly grown up with housing now, so you probably, if anything was there, either the energy of the area has changed or it decided to move on. But they saw it in the same area for years and years and years. But it's far more developed now than it was even 20 years ago. That whole area is growing up pretty fast.
So we had a few people thanking you for your service as far as your police work earlier off in the show, and I had missed that.
Thank you.
But
I appreciate that.
We really appreciate the work that you do. Have you had any paranormal experiences or outlandish things happening while you are on duty?
I was patrolling late one night, and I kept hearing something because I drive when I'm patrolling. I drive my windows down. You can drive right by somebody breaking in breaking into a house and not hear a thing if you get your windows up and your radio on. So I don't listen to music. I just listen for my radio, and I like to drive with my windows down so I can hear things. So I was driving along really slowly right on the edge of town, and I kept hearing something in the bushes. So I stopped and just put the car in park and listened, and I kept hearing it. So I flipped it, and I've got a really bright spotlight on my car. I flipped the light on and start panning the trees, and I see probably 8-9 sets of eyes, glowing green eyes staring back. I mean, I'm like, what the heck is that? So I get out of the car. I want to know. I mean, I'm not going to, I'm not going to put it in reverse and get the heck out of there. I want to know what it is. So as I get closer with my flashlight, it was a bunch of raccoons, but it scared the crap out of me at the time.
Holy shnikes. Well, that was very brave of you. I don't know if
we get paid to go toward the creepy stuff.
Right? What is that?
I don't spook easily, so I'm usually the guy that wants to go find out what that was. I mean, even if I was out in the woods camping and I heard a loud noise, I'm more likely to grab a flashlight and a pistol and go find out what the heck it was than zip the tent up and pull the sleeping bag up. I want to know. I want to be the first one to go find out.
I don't know if this has anything to do with what we were talking about earlier. Tim Coonbo Baker going to resolve the after. Go ahead.
He's a well-known name in Bigfoot research. I actually exchanged emails with the guy briefly years ago. I would love to meet the guy. He lives here in Missouri, but it's literally the other end of the state. I'm in southwest Missouri, and he's up in northern Missouri. Never met the man. Would love to. That guy's got a lot of stories to tell. I've listened to podcasts with him on it. That's a guy, he used to work for NASA. He was a scientist for NASA. So when this guy starts giving you information, I listen. He's, as far as I'm concerned, he's one of the more credible sources out there.
That's awesome. Well, he was mentioning that he's going to resolve the aftershave amber they were wearing that flew down into a draw. Do you know about that story?
No, I've got to look that up. But if he thinks that it might have had something to do with the guy's aftershave drawing it in, I wouldn't rule it out. I mean, a lot of animals will go find out what a strange scent is if it's not something I recognize. I've seen that behavior with deer. I've seen that behavior with coyotes. You put something that they don't know what it is in an area, they're going to come check it out. It makes them curious. New sights, new sounds, new smells will draw animals in, so that makes sense. I mean, it certainly would be within the realm of possibility.
Yeah, it's interesting the different things that do work. Let's see, I'm trying to think of what else there is. As far as Native American lore and such, in the tribes around your area, have you ever heard of like medicine men or seventh son of a seventh son or anything like that? Like any stories that perhaps your granny or your mom might have told?
I've heard all kinds of tales about like the Neosho spook light, the Jopson spook light, whichever you want to call it. I've heard all kinds of stories about that, and some of them date back to Native American times, some of them more modern times. But if you dig deep enough in the Ozarks, you'll find stories about anything. There's a lot of Native Americans here in this area. Some of them will sit down and tell you stories. Some won't. Some are pretty secretive about it. But there's lore in this area. The Ozarks are old. The Ozark Plateau has been around as long as the Rockies. This is an old area with a lot of secrets. These deep, to use my hillbilly vernacular, the deep hills and hollers of this place will have stories that'll put the hair on the back of your neck on edge. I mean, there's some creepy stuff that's happened around here. Not all of it's been monster related. Some of it's been just plain animals. I mean, people getting dragged off by mountain lions. That happens. I mean, this is a pretty primitive area with a lot of very superstitious folks in it. And just because they're superstitious and from the backwoods doesn't mean you should discount what they have to say. Mm-hmm. There was one account I heard about supposedly happened back in the 30s, somewhere up near. No, it was in the 20s because it was during the Depression. Some guys that that lived up on the other side of Sleeper, Missouri, which is a little bitty town. I mean, it's not much more than a wide spot in the road. When I say it's a little town, it's a little bitty town. But some people that lived outside Sleeper, Missouri, on one of the farms went back in the deep woods to cut wood, just to cut some of the thick, heavy old growth timber to sell, and were ran out of their wood camp by what they could describe as a wild, hairy man. And this was the Great Depression, when people, they made things work. To hear people ran off and left lanterns and axes and everything else in the camp and didn't go back for it, something had to scare the crap out of these guys. So these are just stories that I've heard. I've collected growing up. My uncle, who recently passed away, had said that he one night, he had a full basement on his house with a pool table down there, and saw something standing in the sliding glass door looking in at him. And he said by the time he got the porch light on, it was already running down the bluff down toward the river. So he was one of those people that if he said something happened, I didn't have a doubt in my mind, as he wasn't the kind of guy to spin yarns or spend a whole lot of time talking about nonsense. He was a pretty straightforward, down-to-earth business kind of guy. And if Uncle Buddy said something happened, I believe it happened. Right. So there's things like that, accounts like that from people that are stone cold sober and absolutely as reliable as the sun coming up in the morning. So things like that have happened. I mean, there are people out there that aren't going back to I saw the tornado. These aren't the rednecks that they interview on the nightly news. These are people that just don't want to bring it up in the general public and won't talk to people they don't know because they don't want city folks making fun of them. And I believe a lot of these accounts to be true. I've got no reason to doubt some of these folks. And if they say it's out there, it's out there.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of strange stuff out there. And we were talking about goblins and little people, or these little gremlin things and little people. The little people that I saw was up Wildcat Canyon in, I believe it was Coxville, Arkansas. And I was staying with my sister at the time, and due to all the paranormal things I had experienced as a kid, I stay up very late. So my bedtime's about 3 or 4 in the morning, sometimes later. And so I'm laying there trying to go to sleep, and I start hearing this noise in the kitchen, and my sister leaves the light on in the utility room, which is attached. And so I'm thinking she's getting up, she's going to come out and play Scrabble with me or something. And so I'm watching and waiting. And all of a sudden, I see these 2 little people. First it's 1, then it's 2. In my sister's kitchen, she has this little shelf area, which has a space of about 20 inches or so. And then another area above it where all the cups and stuff are kept and other things are kept below. But these things are on there, and they're probably about 12 to 14 inches tall. They look like little people, basically, just like you and me, but little. One had a white long-sleeve shirt on and some, they call them capris, but these were like waders, basically wader pants. And the other one was wearing coveralls, and I don't think he had a shirt on. But the one sits on the edge of the bookshelf portion of it and is chattering along, just kicking his legs. And the other one comes up behind him and pushes him, and he flips around really quick and grabs the edge and pulls himself back up, and they're fighting, and I'm just like, no way is this happening right now. Like, I'm tripping out. The CO2's got to be high or something in here. So I go to sit up to go get a closer look, and as I sit up, I lose the view of them because the wall and the door jamb gets in the way. And then I go in there, and they're gone. But different particular things would happen there as far as things disappearing, socks, cigarettes, lighters, keys, whatever.
Little items.
So we started calling them the takers, and then we learned to ask, can you please bring that back? Like, I really need that. And right where you looked the very first time is where it would be. So it was pretty interesting. So to me, those are little people because they look just like little people. And the other ones are like gremlins, goblins. I don't know what you want to call them, but very interesting for sure. Mind-blowing.
Well, I wouldn't rule it out. I mean, like we said, on many occasions there tonight, that there's plenty of things out there we don't know. I would never say something like that can't exist, because every time we say something can't exist, we find proof it did. They said that the megalodon was extinct, but there are a number of sightings. In fact, most of the fossil records, when you find fossilized shark's teeth, they're usually blackened from the fossilization. And they found one off the coast of Australia when they were on a dredging operation. It was still white, which means it hadn't been out very long. And this is a tooth, 8-9 inches long.
Yeah.
This is not from your normal great white. So, if a prehistoric shark that supposedly went extinct millions of years ago might still be out there, God knows what else is. And we know less about the bottom of our ocean than we do about the surface of the moon. We've explored, a small fraction of the ocean, maybe less than 10%. And we only barely explored the Marianas Trench, and that's the deepest point on the ocean. I mean, there's only limited technology that'll even get you there, and it'll get you there for brief periods of time. It's not like they can camp out down there and see what's down there. They go down there for a few minutes, and they've got to head back up. That kind of pressure, it takes a long time to decompress to get people back up. So we know very little about it. Until we can have submersibles that can get that deep and stay there for extended periods of time to study. We're never going to see what's down there. It wasn't all that long ago they believed the giant squid didn't exist until they got one on camera and started finding body parts washed up on shore. These are huge discoveries. Yeah, these are huge discoveries. And you start thinking about things they call if you know about the cryptid called the Lusca. They believe is responsible for people going missing in what are called blue holes, extremely deep water pools. And they say that a lot of these blue holes are probably connected by a network of passages below the ground because we don't know how deep these holes go. And they think some of the passages may only be inches wide. Well, there's really only one creature that we know about that is capable of squeezing through something the size of a quarter, and that's an octopus. So maybe the Lusca that has been making people disappear for the longest period of time in these blue holes is a species of octopus we haven't encountered before. There's explanations for things, but we may not always know what they are. I think eventually we'll be able to explain some of this stuff, more of this stuff, especially as technology is evolving and growing. We've got the capability of buying drones now and you can buy a infrared camera. It's only a matter of time till somebody gets some really good images of something in the woods that we haven't seen before, because those things are very, very, very quiet and then go places where you can't go because they go above it and go across areas of terrain or areas of very dense foliage where we can't get through. And you never know when it's going to pop over a hill and something's looking up like, what the heck is that? And you've suddenly got a very clear picture of a cryptid that we thought that, they're only cryptid because they're unknown to science. But the moment they bring forth proof, they're dragged out of the cryptid category, and now they're a known species. So cryptid doesn't necessarily mean they don't exist. It means we just haven't proven it yet.
Well, yeah, and you can go to school to do such things.
Exactly.
But yeah, with the Megalodon, my brother lives in Georgia, and there's different very large-looking sharks that wash up with their heads missing, or whales with huge bites taken out of them. Like, the only way to explain that is Megalodon, because, I think they even got a little bit of footage on the bottom of the ocean of one come up really quick and then left. Yeah,
it was only on camera for a few seconds, but they estimated it to be close to, I think, 60 feet long. Mm-hmm. That's a big shark. That's a big anything.
Yeah, it's huge. And they're just now learning, the great white actually goes further and into colder and warmer places than they originally thought it did. They're tracking them these days, so they get it. But, yeah, we can't even get to some of these sharks.
They found bull sharks, full-grown bull sharks, hundreds of miles up the Mississippi. And they said that previously they used to say that sharks couldn't exist in fresh water. Mm-hmm. Well, apparently the bull shark can, at least for periods of time.
It's pretty scary. Hey, what happened to Larry, the kid down the road?
I'd hate to be wading in the water and lose a leg. I grew up swimming in the rivers and lakes around here. The thought that suddenly we might have sharks in one. And supposedly, and this would have to have been something that somebody released, supposedly a fisherman here on Lake of the Ozarks a number of years ago caught a piranha. Now, that lake's too cold to sustain a population of piranha. They're a tropical fish, but piranha get pretty big. He thought it was a perch till he went to take the hook out of its mouth and saw the mouth was full of teeth. So, it's probably the case of somebody released one into the lake thinking it'd be funny, or they got too big for them to handle, or because you can buy them as pets, but that lake gets too cold in the wintertime for it to survive a single year, so it had to have been released that season. But there's plenty of fish in there it could eat. I can guarantee you that. I've caught a lot of fish off that lake.
Well, yeah, and our genetics, like whatever we're exposed to, our genetics automatically change, and the next generation is just a bit different due to different things. So, I mean, I think that's...
Nothing if not adaptable.
Yeah, with everything that's created, what used to be only salt water could perhaps now be fresh water too. It's really a scary thought. I mean, rivers and kids scare me anyways, but...
Look at the large species of like boa constrictors and anaconda that were accidentally introduced into the Florida Everglades and are now taking over. 50 years ago, if you'd have said there's giant snakes in the Everglades, people would have, there's not. There's rattlesnakes and stuff out there, but there's no giant snakes. But they've caught snakes in excess of 17 feet long in the Everglades, and that's documented. They say in parts of the Everglades now you can't find small mammals because these snakes have decimated the indigenous populations. They're an invasive species.
Wow.
So if they can live here, God knows what can. And they're adapting. They're getting farther north.
Yeah, and the color of those things. And I only know this because I was watching the Chinese market where they sell anything and everything you could think of putting in your mouth. And they actually had several different boa constrictors and very large snakes cut into pieces, and just the different colors and patterns on them was quite exotic. But I was just like blown away the things that they eat over there. And the colors of these snakes. It was pretty, and they were huge. It was like logs, but snakes.
Well, the green anaconda is the largest species of snake in the world, and it can reach right up to 30 feet long. That's well big enough to eat a person.
Nikki said there was a couple just recently that caught on camera 2 great whites attacking and killing a whale. She said that it said in the news article that scientists didn't believe sharks would do that, but there was 2 great whites caught on video
working in tandem,
killing a giant whale. Yes.
Doesn't surprise me. I mean, literally, like we were saying, they don't know much about what happens in the ocean. How do we know that they don't spend their times when they work in tandem, or they might hunt in packs? We don't know that much about their behavior. There are scientists that study it, but it's very difficult to track the movements of these sharks, even with tracking devices. Years ago, off the coast of South Africa, I believe it was, they had placed a tracking chip on one of the larger great sharks they'd seen. They were talking 13, 14 foot range. And they were tracking it, and all of a sudden it took off at a high rate of speed, dove, and was heading for very, very deep water, and then disappeared. I mean, the tracker was just gone. So they believe a predator big enough to eat a 13-foot great white shark took this shark out.
Wow.
That's what they think happened. So that's a big predator that can take a shark out that big.
And you said it was a 13-foot?
Yeah, it was a big great white.
Wow.
It was one of the bigger ones they'd managed to put a tracker on. It was probably the 13, 14 foot range. I can't remember the exact size, but it was a big great white, big female.
That is insane. And usually the females are larger than the males for some reason. But yeah, just like the shark hunting from below, so as would the megalodon, I would think. Wow. I could just picture it swimming right into its mouth.
Yeah.
Poop. There you go. It's gone.
It wasn't all that long ago I saw an article about a guy, I believe this was off Cape Hatteras. He was fishing for sharks, and he caught one and was reeling it in, and turned out to be a good-sized great white. And when he felt the line suddenly go taut, like it was trying to get away, and then it went slack, and when he hauled it in, he had like the front 3 feet of its head, and head was probably good 1.5 2 feet wide.
Holy
so this was not a small
shnikes.
shark. This was not a small shark, and something bit the body off in one bite.
Yeah, I think that's probably the article I saw, because like the guy had the the shark head, but the rest of it was gone.
Mm-hmm. It takes a big animal to do that. And it had probably, considering, I don't even think an orca would have done that. Orca would have taken chunks out, and they feed in pods, so there'd be numerous chunks out of it. But this is, from the look of that, it looked like something came up behind it in one bite and took it off just behind the head.
Yeah, and orcas tend to like to play with their food as well.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Yeah, so many unexplainable things out there, and it's amazing, like, how intelligent they are. You know, when I do think of sharks, I do think of the dogs of the sea, or like a wolf pack or whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
Very interesting. And just thinking about all the different things that are out there. So as far as the paranormal, have you ever seen in Missouri a UFO sighting, or have there been UFO sightings or alien encounters out there?
There's sightings in this area of things like that. I've never personally seen anything that I could attribute to being, well, if by the strictest definition of UFO being unidentified flying object, I've seen lights at night I couldn't identify. My wife said when she was a young girl, they were coming back from her family's house in Bolivar, Missouri, and a light followed their vehicle from Bolivar to just about the city limits of Springfield, then peeled off and took off. They never identified what it was, but she said it's something that always stuck with her. So, yeah, I believe they're out there. I mean, as big as the universe is and as many planets are out there, we'd be incredibly, incredibly arrogant to think we're the only life in the universe, the only intelligent life. It's out there. We just, I would think that if alien life forms had the technology and the advanced civilization to build faster than light, or the ability to fold space to travel quickly, if they had the advanced travel capability to travel great vast distances across the galaxy, that they would probably avoid us like the plague. I mean, Earth's got to be the Arkansas of the universe.
Right?
I can't imagine they'd want to make contact with us, as we're still killing each other off like it's the national pastime. I can't imagine they would think we would do any less with them.
Well, yeah, and then there was that sighting near Hollywood where, it's like, shoot first and ask questions later. They got all the lights pinned on there. They got all these weapons firing at. And I always remembered it as one, but then recently I heard that it was more than one UFO craft at that point. But you see pictures of it in the paper and everything, and then all of a sudden it too, as well as, is swept under the rug. But
yeah, well, look how quickly the story about the Phoenix lights disappeared, and those were seen by thousands and thousands of people on more than one occasion. It's weird how anytime you've got something like that that's seen by so many people and even photographed and filmed, the story just disappears.
Yeah, and the governor, or whoever this guy was, had a very large display where they're like, yes, and we caught the culprit, and they bring a guy in with the alien head on, and made a big old joke about it. But once he was out of office, he even admitted that it was real, and they made him cover it up and act like that had never happened. It's just, military vehicles and so on and so forth. But after, like I said, after being out of office, he finally admitted to it. But while in office, has to do with what the government says, basically, and cover it up.
Yeah.
And, I've always
I don't know
wondered
why they
about
cover
it.
it up. I don't know why they don't. Why would they bother covering it up? Of course, I know there's initially if they come out and said, okay, it's all real. If the government came out tomorrow and said everything you've ever thought was real that we've denied, it's all real, there'd be a panic for a while. But I think people would finally go, you know what? Okay, we've lived our lives all this time not knowing they were real. Knowing they're real changes nothing. I think we're resilient enough that we can handle it. It might take us a while. It might take a little while to adjust. I mean, there would be people that would never set foot in the woods again if they found out Bigfoot was real tomorrow, or Dogman was real tomorrow. If it became public knowledge that these creatures existed, there'd be a number of people that would never step foot in the woods again. Probably wouldn't even want to drive through them. But then there would be just as many people that would want to round up as many guns as they could find and go find one. So you got opposite ends of the spectrum on reactions on that. And I'm not necessarily on the school of thought that we need to go kill one to bring it in to prove they exist. I'm not advocating killing anything unless there's a purpose for it. I've hunted deer and turkey and stuff like that, but I ate those. I don't trophy hunt.
Yeah.
If I shoot a deer, it's to go in the deep freeze. Um, Same with turkey. I mean, if I'm going to shoot something, I'm going to eat it. And I wouldn't advocate going out and hunting an unknown cryptid down to kill one just to throw it on somebody's desk and go, see, they do exist. That's not saying if it attacked me or came after me, I wouldn't defend myself. That's a whole different ball of wax. But I'm not going to go looking to shoot one.
Yeah, I don't know if you'd heard the story or not about the fella. I think he was out drinking with his friends, and they actually found a pair of Bigfoot and were chasing it down and actually shot one. And then once they found or went to where the one was shot, it was so humanistic. Like, the guy felt really bad about it and actually buried it, and supposedly retains where he buried it, but he'll only tell, somebody that he trusts. So that evidence has never come out, and we've never found bones of Bigfoot, but I don't think that means they don't exist. I think they're just really good at cleaning up after themselves.
Well, people have said, for years and years, how come we've never found the bones of one in the wild? Well, I've spent a good chunk of my life walking through the woods, and I've never found a bear skull. I've never found bear bones. If something dies out in the woods, it tends to get, if it's not just, the skeleton is completely scattered all across the place by scavengers. Animals, when they know they're going to die, tend to go someplace out of the way to avoid, avoid predators and to die in peace. I can't say that's going to be any different with a bear. I mean, if it knows it's going to die, it's probably going to go crawl back in a cave somewhere where we can't easily get to them and die. Maybe the same things with Bigfoot. And if they're intelligent in any way, who's to say they don't bury their dead or carry their dead off? Maybe that's why we haven't found them. We don't know.
Yeah, Nikki says they collect their dead, and if they are, humanistic or some sort of hominoid, I could see them having different burial rituals or different things that they do. There's
an anthropologist. Well, actually, I'm sorry. I don't know if he's an anthropologist, but he wrote a book called Them and Us. And the guy's name is Danny Vendramini, and he did a forensic reconstruction of Neanderthals. Now, when Neanderthals were first found, the scientists that found them were in the infancy of paleontology. And when they recreated these skeletons, put them together, most of them didn't have any flesh on them whatsoever. They were finding fossils, they were finding bones. So they made them look very humanoid, very human. Well, Vendramini did a forensic reconstruction from the bone records. And if you Google Danny Vendramini, Them and Us, and see the picture, what they came up with is horrifying. And it looks very much like a Bigfoot. Who's to say Bigfoot's not a relic population of Neanderthal? We don't know. We don't know what they are.
Yeah, except for scary.
But if you get a chance to read Them and Us, it's an interesting book.
You'll have to check that out. And always as a kid, I'd always thought of Bigfoot as like Harry and the Hendersons, somewhat lovable and cute and such. But they're really quite scary. And I don't generally plug other shows, but Coast to Coast put out an article about a sighting of a Bigfoot. This man and wife, or boyfriend and girlfriend, were working on a trailer, and they kept hearing a noise outside. And I guess out of his peripheral, he saw something going by the window, which is about 7 or 8 feet off the ground. And he grabbed his phone and turned and just started taking pictures. And the picture that he got of this thing like peeking in, he said at first it was like a kid and it just like closed its eyes, like, if I can't see you, you can't see me sort of thing. And then it opens its eyes again and they just like seem like so black, and it was quite unnerving. I guess the wife really threw a panic fit when she saw the pictures and wanted to leave immediately. But I don't think this thing wanted to cause them harm. It just heard all this noise and was curious, what are they doing? And just, kind of checking it out.
Yeah. Well, I think, if you went and picked out 5 dogs at random and took them all into your house and fed them and kept them, you're going to notice those dogs have 5 very different personalities. Anybody that's owned dogs or cats, for that matter, knows that each animal, each dog has its own personality. The dog I have now, Harley, he's full of personality, but a big animal is dangerous if it's hungry.
Well, yeah, and going back to the whole UFO thing, like I used to think we were ready for it too, and the whole Ancient Aliens and these other shows that have been out are prepping us for this. But to see how everybody's reacted to this coronavirus, how it's like every man for himself, and everybody's taking the food. They don't care about, the families out there on food stamps that can't go out and get a meal made for them, or the elderly people that can't get out in time to get it. Like, yeah, I think we took a few steps back with this, but it's very unnerving, and, I used to think we are ready, but I don't think the majority of us are. I think there's a small percentage of us that can wrap our minds around it, but for the most part, I think it's going to be a whole panic thing, just like this virus and other things that we thought we'd react so much better to than we
I definitely agree with that. When you deal with people as a large group, we're panicky. We're panicky animals. And then when things start turning bad, it quickly devolves into every person for themselves. But there's still people out there that will wade into harm's way, will put their own life at risk for others. There are still people out there that will give till it hurts. Give you the shirt off their back, would give you the food off their own table to keep you from starving. There are people out there, but it seems like that is becoming less and less common. There's more and more people seem to have that. I'm only concerned about me. I'm only in it for me mentality, and I hate to see that because you barely saw that when I was a kid. I was born in 1970 and grew up in rural Missouri. And back then, you never met a stranger, even if you never met them before. They were the neighbor, cousin, so and so of somebody you knew.